Hello, hello, chat. Hello. How's it going? Today we are going to be going over a little bit about the psychology and the mental game aspects of competition. For all of us here, we're all fencers in the context of the SCA and in HEMA, but this can be applied to any other competitive endeavor, including esports, is what comes to mind for me. All right, so what I want to do is hand it over to the folks to introduce themselves. In the top left I can do this, over there. We did it. Dominic, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Most of you should know me. My name is Dominic Wolfram. I'm currently in LOCAC. I started and had most of my career in Atlantia. I'm a Master of Defense, and I'm a pretty successful tournament fighter, and I've focused on that a lot through my career. And so the mental aspect is something that I geek out about a lot and think is very, very important. So pass it over to John, who I'm sure everyone knows.
I'm
This one right there.
Master John Drake, and I'm from Monstiora. I've also put a lot of focus on tournament fighting because I definitely like that. It's my favorite. Like, I don't mind melees, but I definitely prefer tournament fighting. So yeah, I've definitely, like Dom, put a lot of thought into figuring out how to optimize the mind because I wasn't very good at tournament fighting when I first started the SCA fencing. I was bad at tournament fighting. Did not like tournaments very much, but I wanted to do well at them, so I put a lot of effort into getting my head right.
All right, and
so
then
can you hear from Rowan now?
And Rowan, can we do this?
Oh, sorry.
Figuring it out.
You're fine. I'm Millicent Rowan. I've also prefer high-level tournaments, so champs fights at Penzic or at Gulf Wars are like my favorite events or my favorite tournaments to be in, as well as Kings and Queens Champion in the East. I enjoy that type of high-level tournament, but in order to get there reliably, I had to train in mental toughness or like getting into your zone of optimal functioning. When I first started, actually, John Drake's mom shared me a lot of like get into the zone of optimal functioning papers. So actually research studies done on athletes to help them perform at their optimal ability. So usually for basketball players or for golfers, anyone kind of playing a sport by themselves rather than a team sport. It's what I studied a lot, and I love teaching about it.
Was that a cat?
Yep.
Oh.
Boomy, I think your phone's still on.
My phone?
Is that the blue screen?
Oh no, this is my Discord. I'm actually just covering the advert that they show. I don't know if I
Okay.
close it. Oh, hey, look at that. I can't close it. Look at that. I'm just learning Discord as we go. Here we go. Look at that.
I like
Fucking
that you
fancy.
covered your
Good call. Thank you for pointing
Look
that
at
out.
that.
We're learning as we
There we
go. All right. So to kick it off, I think we have a general outline. Dom, can you run us through the first thing that we're going to go over?
Sure. So first thing we're going to talk about is what fighter mindset is and what it isn't, right? Mentality and psychology of fighting can cover a lot of different things, a lot of different aspects of what we do, right? So we want to talk about specifically what we're talking about and what we're trying to focus on in this podcast, because there's so many different things. For instance, how do you prepare, right? And how do you fight on the day? And what your fighter mindset does to affect the way you practice and that kind of thing. So when I think of being in the fighter mindset, I think of being in a headspace at an event where I can focus completely on the fight in front of me, right? That being said, there are external factors to take into account, right? Like you can't just completely isolate yourself into the very beginning of the fight. Right. So that to me is kind of where we're focusing. Right. We're also going to talk a lot about how to be healthy and how to have a healthy mindset based on all the different things that we're talking about. So that's kind of where we're going to start. So Rowan, you talked a little bit about what you thought it was and how you came to it from there. Why don't you talk about what you think it is, or start out on what you think fighter mindset is to you specifically?
For sure. So big thing that I focus on for fighter's mindset, or what it means to me, is that no matter what's happening in my personal life or at the event or any kind of distractions, that I can sort of delete everything and come back to my best mindset. And each person's mindset is going to be totally different from another person. It's kind of sucks that we don't have like a blueprint that we could hand somebody and be like, here's how to be a good at fighting mentally. Um, but once I found out what helps me and hurts me, I can try to build up the things that help me and eliminate the things that hurt me to snap back into the right mindset. So if you show up at an event and you're sick or you're exhausted or like your cat just died, you can sort of get it all out of your head and just focus on the person right in front of you. And that's the only thing that matters in the world.
Okay.
That's my main jam.
So that
But
I have a little bit of a different perspective on that, right?
Yeah.
Boomy, what do you think? What does it mean to you?
To have a fighter's mindset, to me, is it is trying to parse the context in which you are, like frame what you're doing in the moment, right? So, like a champs fight feels different psychologically than, say, a grindy long tournament or a bear pit. And then how intense is it really has a lot of like personal investments, right? Do you hold the thing in high value? Is there like social pressure? And that will change what my perspective is going to any bout or competition. And I think
Sure.
that for me, one of the largest ongoing challenges that I have is just getting to a point where I actually feel like I'm in the fight at the like fully involved in the fight, where all the other things have fallen away. So I'm easily taken out of the zone, as it were. And John can attest that it is hard for me to kind of turn on that last little bit of heat that it takes to really compete at the highest level. And then for me, I do way better when I can ramp up in a tournament. Like in a champs fight, while I have a reasonable record in my champs fight, I would much rather go through an Ancion tournament where I have had several hard fights. I continue to grind,
So you ramp it up.
and
You
it
ramp
ramps
up as
in, and
opposed-
my mind is way better going into the semis and into the finals. I get a lot more
Okay.
zone time, as it were.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's basically we're all kind of coming down to how to focus and how to get your mind right so your best performance in the fight in front of you,
Correct.
right?
Be present
And
as
we
fully
talk
as
we
possible.
talk about how to exclude things, but at the same time we can't really block everything out, right? Like there's no for me, right? My performance gets better when there's in a chance fight. I've never lost a chance fight, right? So I can't say that I completely block everything out. What do you think, John? How would you define it if someone was asking you what is the fighter's mindset or the winning mindset for a tournament?
I think everyone's hit on some really good points here. So one thing I wanted to address of actually something that Boomy said was that he needed like to ramp up into a tournament. Like he couldn't, like he wasn't as into the fight in the first few rounds or a champs fight where it's isolated.
Mhm.
And I experienced I have a similar issue, but I think it's from an opposite direction. Where the first few rounds I'll feel real jittery and like my adrenaline is too high and I'm too anxious. And after a couple fights, I've actually like relaxed and gotten into a rhythm. Versus I think Boomy needs to ramp up. I have to like calm myself
Yeah.
down. And I think
Okay.
that's for a lot of people tend to either be and even on the individual moment, people tend to either be too high or too low. And it's kind of what
Sure.
Rowan was talking about with the optimal like zone of optimal function. You have to figure out like, man, am I too anxious? Is everything too much? Or am I like not motivated? Am I like tired? Do I need to like ramp myself up? And you kind of have to figure out whether you need to like which
Well,
one
that
you
can be
have.
different for everybody. We're going to hit on that a lot, right? It's going to feel different for everybody,
Yeah,
right?
and it'll feel different depending on the day. Generally, for me as a rule, I have to like make sure that I'm calm because I'll get anxious,
Sure.
and I used to get even more anxious. So like, part of my explanation was just because I'd fight great in practice. So I'm kind of also the opposite of Dom too, where I'd fight great in practice where there was no pressure, or in a bear pit where there's very little pressure.
Mm.
But give me a champs fight or a single limb tournament or something, and I would not do as well because I like couldn't. Um, I couldn't relax. I couldn't get into a rhythm,
Sure.
and so I had to learn
So,
to just
so it
kind
was
of like
affecting your performance negatively to be too
yeah,
active.
yeah. So I had to calm myself down and be like, no, this is just. Then my mantra, and Boomy will know this one, and Rowan will know this. Like I just say, it's just business, right? Like I'm just out here to fight.
Just business. I like it.
I'm not worried. Like it doesn't matter. I'm hitting my job is to hit my opponent, get hit, and move on with my day.
All right, so we talked about what fighter mindset is not. Fighter mindset is not practice. Has to be very different than practice, right? We've all kind of hit on this a little bit, right? We need, right? I mean, everyone can attest, right? It has to be different than practice because in practice there are no stakes other than maybe social standing or
Yeah.
your
And
improvement, right? But that's different.
and if you're only getting into your tournament mindset at practice, then what are you practicing? Like,
It's true.
practice is for working on stuff, unless you're working on your mental mindset. Like, I did use practice to get into my mindset. I used to do that a lot because I used to have a hard time with crowds. And so I'd go to practice and I would pretend there was a crowd around me the whole time.
Hmm.
And it desensitized me to the crowd. So I was practicing my mental mindset at practice.
True.
But most of the time, I work on my footwork or my dagger or whatever.
Right.
I'm not there to win practice.
Boomy, what do you think the difference is between practice and the tournament mindset?
Oh, I'm with John. It is just doing business in a tournament. It is like I am here to accomplish the victory. That is my goal, or whatever your goal is going to. It doesn't have to be a victory. It could be whatever it is that you set out. It could even be something as simple as like I intended to, like my goal with you very specifically. I had like a progressive how to fight Dom goal set, and the first time it was like stop getting pushed back. Like just be able to push you at all, like make you threaten at all. If I can get you to step back a little bit, I'm succeeding. And then from there, after that was successful, the next step was now can I actually keep ground, not get shoved into a fence.
Okay, we should
So
definitely talk
that's what
about
it's
that
like.
when we get into the details of like how to develop your fighter mindset,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because that's really deep into how to turn your mindset towards your opponent, which we should definitely talk about.
But that
Another
is
point I
a
wanted to make is that okay, go ahead, sorry, Ben.
oh, I was saying that was kind of how I like perceive the difference between practicing and then
Okay.
goal setting.
So you have a specific goal in the tournament. Your goal is a part of your stuff.
I think everyone should. Everyone should walk in with a goal. Sometimes it could be as simple as I want to win this, but it could be as complicated as I intend to not get 0-2 and out.
I think that's a huge part of it, right? Is what there's a phrase, keeping the goal, right? I mean, so your goal. I mean, there's only going to be one winner of the tournament, right? But your goal should obviously be to win the tournament. However, if you do have a specific other goal that you're pursuing, right? Like don't let Dominic push you against the fence. Um, then that should be like part of what you're mentally focusing on, right? So,
Agreed.
all right. Another thing I want to point out is that the fighter mindset is not an accident. Outside of a very few specific cases, who are savants and just can, be that guy. Almost everyone who has had success in fencing and fighting in general, right, has developed a specific mindset and a specific way to engage in different tournaments, right? So even if you hear someone say, "Oh, I didn't really think about it," or "I don't really care about it," it's not true. Right? They do, and they may just not specifically think about it, but it is not an accident.
Very good point.
So, all right. Now we wanted to take a little bit of time and let each of the participants here tell their kind of story about their career. We've already hit on a little bit, right? About how they've developed their fighter mindset through the years. We've all had different levels of different number of years experience. So why don't we start with John, since he started probably earliest of all of us, as far as age goes.
As far as age, that's probably true. Yeah, I started fencing in the SCA when I was 14. I had not really done any other organized sports or anything before that because I was homeschooled. So the SCA was like a good outlet for me to do that. And the first few tournaments I fought in, I did really bad. I did worse than I did in practice. Like I lost fighters that I beat in practice. Pretty consistently. Like I would beat people in practice consistently, and I would lose. I lost them in tournaments. So it took me a while to really feel like I wasn't just panicking
What
when I
was
was
your
fighting.
age?
And I was
Like
I
when you
was young,
first
What's
entered the
that?
tournament. What is your age when you first entered the tournament?
14. So I
Okay.
started started in like the late summer going to practice, and then first tournament was in like I said, it was almost 15. It was the same month I turned 15, but I was still 14, and it was a youth tournament. But still, like I fought other kids that I beat in practice, but they beat me in that tournament.
I was gonna say, are you fighting in an adult tournament?
No,
A bunch of kids beating up on a 14-year-old, right?
I fought my first adult tournament when I was 16, which was, and then I fought in Onster and Queen's Champion, and I actually made it to the top 6 of that tournament. So I kind of had a pretty good. It was a little bit of just kind of beginner's luck. Not beginner. I was been fighting for 2 years, I guess, at that point. But it was like I just had a good day that day. But I really didn't have a good control of my mindset. Like I was just kind of like lucked into like some days I would feel like my head was good, some days it wasn't. And I really hated that inconsistency feeling. So I started looking at what could I do to make it more consistent. I really, so you kind of develop a routine and mental exercise. So I did a lot of like visualization, and I also fought in a lot of tournaments too, right? Like I fought in as many tournaments as I could because I wanted to just practice. And we just talked about practice. You can't simulate the feeling of a tournament in a practice setting. You can get close, like Rowan said, she visualized people being there, but there's nothing like actually being at the tournament, having people watch, having there be a little bit of stakes, or something like a champs fight. Like it's not the same. So like if you're having trouble fighting in tournaments, like my biggest recommendation would just go fight in a ton of tournaments. Like don't miss an opportunity to fight in them because you'll start to get more comfortable with that experience if you're being deliberate about like thinking about how like what maybe changed my like mindset. You want to be deliberate about it, but you want to do it a lot. Um, so, uh, so then I definitely started having a lot of success in tournaments. Kind of once I started to basically be able to like calm myself down, like I mentioned earlier, and kind of think of it being I started taking a little bit of the like. It became a little impersonal. It was like just business, right? It's kind of where I got to. It was like I'm just here to fight. It's not, this is like no other fight. It kind of let the stakes fall back to the mindset, and you're just there in the moment. And you're not thinking about like, well, if I win this, what does that mean for my fencing career or my award advancement, or sometimes like and those thoughts will come into your head, and you just have to practice, and it just takes a lot of mental discipline to like practice keeping all that out of your head and being like, I'm just here in the moment, just fighting. And like I said, I think it just takes time, and I do a lot of visualization too, where you visualize like when I go show up to a tournament, sometimes I'll have fought that tournament hundreds of times in my head before I ever step on the field. And that's worked for me. I think that could not work for some people because that can make you too anxious, I think. But for me, that helped me like calm myself down. There was not less novelty when I actually showed up.
Dom, were you just saying something? Oh, your voice is gone.
Muted
Just so you know.
again.
Yep. You're muted or some such. Not sure what happened. John, so you fought since you were 15 competitively. How, like, was there a turning point for you where it's like, hey, this is me being like kind of a nervous youngster versus like, no, I feel like I'm one of the fighters, right? Regardless of age, where it's like, okay, I step on feeling like an equal as opposed to a.
Yeah, there were certainly multiple turning points. Probably around the time I was like like 18, 17, I really started to feel like I think I'd like my mental game developed, and also like I was just physically a little more developed too, right? Like
Yeah, that makes sense.
and I just started feeling like I think my confidence really jumped up at that point, and I started really feeling like
Okay.
like I could compete with. I was not like definitely wasn't the best fighter, and there were certainly guys who would still just like dumpster me, but I could hang with. I feel like I could at least hang with almost everyone in the kingdom at that point. Um, but there's been several like jumps. Like a big jump was in 2017 when I won the Onster tourney for the first time
Oh yeah.
at Penzik. That was a big shift because that one, after that, and I've been fencing for about 10 years at that point. Um, oh, pretty much exactly 10 years. After that tournament, I felt like suddenly it was a lot easier to win. Like, like I had won a lot, but suddenly the winning became much more like it just felt easier. And like so that took it took me 10 years. I don't know that it would take everyone 10 years, but that was actually a big shift for me. Like I think I did a lot of training in 2016, and it really I think paid off in 2017. And the big difference was I felt like before that it still took a lot of focus to keep my mental game right, and after that it became much more like rote. Like I was just like
Yeah.
I could turn on my mental
Automatic.
state much more easily. And I really feel like that tournament for some reason was like a big turning point. Like that made me feel like not like I was one of like I felt like I was like one of the very best at that day. So it really cemented it for me in my
Oh,
mind.
we have a little bit of echo. I don't know where from. Um, the original question was like telling about our personal career, right? Or our personal journey.
That's what I thought Tom had.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All
Is
right.
this
I'm decided to shit the bed. Oh well.
Sag?
Um, yeah. So, John, what do you visualize? The fights themselves?
Oh yeah, I should have gone more detail on that. I definitely go through if there's a tournament I'm getting ready for, I will go through every fighter that I'm concerned about fighting. Um, and like that pool will grow and shrink depending on the tournament and depending on your skill level, right? Like when you're newer, you kind of have to worry about everyone in the list,
Sure.
versus when you're much better, like you might only need to worry about 3 or 4 guys, right? But I'll just visualize fighting them. I'll be like, so I'll have a really good plan. Like I'll have an idea of what I'm gonna do, like tendencies and stuff, and that becomes more and more practice because you start to be like you start to have fenced the top fighters in your kingdom or your area or whatever more
Sure.
and more, so you don't need as much prep. But I really think for me, the unknown is scary, so that makes me nervous. So if I have a plan, even if I abandon the plan quickly, um, the plan makes me feel less anxious because I'm like I know what to do, and it makes it feel doable. Like if I do these things, I will win.
Right. Okay. What about so anxious is bad for you,
Yeah,
right?
definitely. I mean,
Negatively affects your performance, right?
I think now I've gotten to a point where I can use the anxiety to is like is like a aid. Like it helps. Like I need a little bit of boost. But for
Yeah.
a long time, my anxiety was like definitely my like biggest struggle.
Sure. All right. Very cool. Um, does chat have any questions for John? Is there anybody even here? There are
Yeah,
6 people here.
there's some humans in chat. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, chat, please drop them. You're welcome to. Anytime we'll address them as they come through. Are we still
All
going
right.
around, Dom, doing the our like a TLDR of our careers?
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna kick
Let
it
me
to.
want you to go ahead.
Oh, all right. I guess I'm going. Um, I started fencing, at least in the SCA, um, and doing sword sports. I think close to 11 years ago now. And I also didn't win an Honest Touring tournament until about 10 years in. 10 to 11 years, I guess. I'm a little bit behind you. And then other than that, I didn't have any other direct competitive sport background. I just did I did team sports and then did like solo pursuits. A lot of like skateboarding as I was growing up. That was the main to do.
Nice.
Yeah, that's the TLDR.
So, how did your mental game develop and change over that period of time? Because I know probably had to modulate when you went to heavy too, right?
Um, it it definitely slow evolved. I don't feel any major shifts as far as the participation in fighting. I've always been a fairly I like to think I am fairly realistic about my own performance potential and expectations. So I try to set expectations accurately. However, I also acknowledge that you tend to have generally it's good to have a little bit more ego as you go into competition type scenarios. And so
Okay.
I like nod to my ego like hey, thank you for giving me the boost to feel like I'm going to go out here and win, even though the stats might not say I'm going to do that. And then follow that with the realistic expectation of like, okay, here are some realistic goals set in this context. Because there was definitely a long period of time where there were people that just I knew were going to win. I couldn't beat them.
Could be. Yeah.
Just like, well, I should say very low percentage chance if I'd like toss some dice and give it some odds. And yeah, and over time that percentage grew smaller and smaller until I was and just build that confidence through the skill development primarily.
And
What do you think do you think there's like your biggest hurdle, like from a mental game perspective, like that you've had in your fencing career? Like what, or do you think it's mostly been the mechanics of the actual fighting?
The biggest mental hurdle for me personally, I think, is when I'm thinking about it, two pronged. One of them is how do I use my brain to calm the flood of drugs that happens before something like a champs fight or a big tournament that you want to win. That was a mental practice. I had to like choose to process through that dump of adrenaline and dopamines and just that huge hit. And depending on the tournament, sometimes you get that huge hit, and then you sit around and you get the drop after as well.
Yeah.
And then you have to like reamp up. It's really I had to learn to do that internally. Didn't do it. That was not something I really vocalized very much, but it was definitely inside my own head. And then secondly, I think probably one that I have felt more recently over the last many years is the mental hurdle of the shift from I'm grinding to climb and chase these people to now I am choosing to make it my privilege to be the person being chased by those around me in my community. Because there has to be a shift at some point. If you kind of grind your way to the top of whatever pool you're looking at, right? If you're looking at like a small Bronio pool, then you have to go out of that to get more experience and climb. But there's a point where like now you're mostly other people's whale to chase. And when you do something good, there's no like applause. It's like, oh yeah, that person just does that thing. And at least in my career, that has been like that's the reason I have no shark's teeth. Is there's always been a high expectation set because of performance, and so no one thought I performed above that expectation, which is what those awards are for.
whatever, man. I got a shark suit for losing a fight.
I didn't get one until armored. I have two shark's teeth, and they're both for armored specifically.
So we should definitely put a pin on that, maybe to talk about towards the end, because I know John has probably dealt with this as well. But there's a definite mental shift to being the person that is being chased.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
That is not really super germane to what we're talking about, how to develop your own fighter mindset here in the rest of the thing. But that is a shift that I've definitely had to deal with. But anyway, all right. We should definitely come back to that one at some point for sure. Rowan.
I feel like I had the most like boost as far as everyone goes because I got to watch John grow up. And so I started fencing when I was 19. He had already been fighting for 5 years. So like he had already kind of built up his mental game and then we were learning together and he started training me. And so I started developing mental stuff like my first year of fencing.
You had scientific papers apparently.
Yeah, from his mom. And then I started listening to all these like Brain in the Game by Dave Diggle podcast and I got way deep in the weeds because I really enjoy it. But I actually I do not necessarily overdo it, but like I try to like guarantee that I'm going to be in the right mindset. And I do that by setting all these anchors. So I use if you watch like somebody playing basketball, when they're about to do a free throw, every single person who does it does a particular ritual right before they throw. So it could be that they look at their wrist, they bounce the ball twice, and then they do their throw. It doesn't really matter what the ritual is, but each person has their individual ritual. So I added that into my game early, like real early. And so I set physical anchors, verbal anchors, um, verbal anchors like it's just business, like the ones John uses. I used vicious for a long time, or hungry. So setting those verbal anchors or those physical anchors helps me get back into the zone no matter what. So even if I'm not feeling very good or I feel under prepped or like we were talking about anxiety, kind of either you're too anxious or you're not anxious enough. At war, I find that early on in war, I'll be too anxious and I'll need to bring it back down. And then as war goes on, I'll not be anxious enough and I'll have to build it back up. So I had to bring in different and opposite techniques to get them both to happen. So sometimes I have to bring up anxiety and I actually like drink a bunch of caffeine and I hyperventilate on purpose and do all this stuff to like get myself really anxious to chase it. Or I listen to kind of calming music and do all the stuff to get me back down if I'm too anxious. So I'm finding this kind of chunk, this zone, and I could go too high and I can go too low, and I have to always chase it no matter what. And as I get better, it can move over the years.
What does it?
But
What does it
like
feel
right
like?
out of the gate, I've been trying to find that.
What does it feel like when you're in the zone? You said you had to chase it. So what does it feel like?
Feels like I'm gonna throw up usually, to be honest. Like it feels sick,
Like,
like, and mentally, I feel like I'm just gonna die. Because I actually did find that a huge place where I'll lose is if I feel a little too comfortable, a little too cocky, a little too sure of myself. So when I feel like I have to fight up, if I feel like I'm the underdog having to fight up to someone, perform way better.
Okay.
So I need to have that anxiety, that fear of losing, that um, that real belief that I can and will lose if I don't bring everything to the table. So I used to actually picture my fighter, the person I was fighting against, to be John, which is messed up, but I'd picture them in a little red coat and fight up to him. Because it was just such a stark contrast to when I underperformed and I was relaxed, or I feel like I got this fight, or I feel comfortable. I'll just be like half a second slower and I'll
Overconfident.
lose. You got it. It's a huge problem for me,
That-
personally.
That is
Cool.
very interesting because I
That's
think
super
my
interesting.
brain goes in the exact opposite direction. Like when I mantra myself, it's usually from the I am the dominant one, not you.
Yeah.
Whether it's
Not
true or
the
not.
ad chase.
It's
Yep.
like false bravado, I suppose.
I think
Well,
that's good.
it's the same thing though. It's the same thing though, right? It's whatever it takes to get the correct intensity in your brain
Yep.
connected to your physical performance, right? So if it's fear of dying, fear of dying. If it's act a certain way that I'm the dominant fighter, it's act a certain way you're the dominant fighter, right? So whatever works. I mean, as long as it works.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
So that's fascinating to hear you have analyzed it that much.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
All right,
It's my favorite thing.
let me let me go through my story, which
Yeah.
is going to be a little bit longer because I've been fighting longer than all of you. Um,
Yeah.
so I had a pretty extensive sports background. I was also homeschooled like John, but I also played like rec sports, and I have 9 brothers and sisters, and we always played sports and we're always competitive. So I'm hyper competitive in that I had to be just to be in the pecking order of my family and the sports performance there. So I came to fencing via a well-known provost at the time, Connor Livingstone. He was going to the school where I grew up, and he's like, "Hey, we actually met where we were doing theater." And he said, "Hey, do you want to go fight with swords on Sunday?" And I was like, "Well, yes." What kind of question is this? Anyway, so that's a long story. We ended up going fencing and stuff. But anyone who's met Connor knows that Connor has a lot of friends, and everyone is his friend. And so he was sort of my best friend when I came into the SCA. And as such, there was sort of a flat baseline of people that I hung out with that was not any way related to the hierarchy of fencing skill. So I remember my first first breakfast after my first event. I was hanging out with Gunny, Adon, Alan, Vivian, and Connor, right? And so those at the time, those were like, and so Christian was there too. Christian was there too. At the time, those were like the top level fighters, like in the entire kingdom. I had no idea, right? I had no idea. So I started interacting with these people while also being not as good a fencer. So I could always see the gap between myself and the people I hung out with and where I wanted to be performance wise. So it was always just sort of a way to get to bridge that gap. And I really like those were the people who I wanted to be, right? Those people would walk into the biggest tournaments and just crush it every time. and just the competition between all of them was just amazing. Even if they didn't realize that I was like fanboying over them, right? Like that was what I wanted to be, right? I wanted to be at that level and have that experience. And so I was pretty athletic physically, and I could rely on that to an extent as I was growing up. But then I encountered a lot of inconsistency. Right, one day I would be really good, next event I would not be good. Um, Sometimes I could beat some people, sometimes I could not beat them. Right, and all the time I'm still trying to climb this ladder, and every time I would climb, every time I'd hit a rung, right, there was another rung next up. Um, and I tried everything, man. I would I kept track of like what I ate the night before, how much sleep I did. I think I still have a spreadsheet of how much caffeine I had before events, based on whatever. And so I was always trying to move up and figure out how to get the consistency. Um, and so the connection between being in the right mental spot, and the physical performance became very important to me, right? Like how do I make sure I'm in the right mindset to make sure that I have the highest level of performance that I can, right? So that's where my mental focus was, right? Like I was like, I do not want to be inconsistent. I want to constantly get better. And how do I mentally focus to bring my performance up to the highest it can be on that specific day? Um, I think um, I'm a little bit different than Rowan and John, where they have to be calm and have to like not be anxious. For me, I'm how to say this. Fencing is awesome, right? And we get to go out there and we get to fight with swords and get to do awesome things. And the more I get to fight and the more fights that I get, the more awesome it is, right? So if there's a high pressure fight, like like a champs fight, or the finals of the Rose tournament at Gulf Wars, whatever, that's awesome, and that to me gives me energy and gives me focus and brings me into the thing because that's what I want to do and I want to have that experience, and it's benefited me a lot because after a while, right, it's easy for me to turn almost any fight into an awesome fight. Like, hey, this is the finals of Podunk event in Backwater, Virginia, right? But it's still awesome, and I still want to go out there and have a great experience doing it. I still can bring that focus through, just being excited, and that's what kind of drives me a lot of times too. Is that feeling, that being there and putting my best against your best, regardless of what's coming before or after, right? That is awesome, and that is what I love, and that's why I do this, right? That's why I'm here on a podcast with these great fighters here. But to continue my story, eventually I climbed the ladder, and I remember there was did you guys still do Chalice of the Sun God? I don't remember.
No,
That one's
it's been
still
gone
thing?
for a while.
No?
Nah, it's not been run for a while. I think
Yeah, that was a good one.
something like 4 or 5 years.
That was an annual one.
Mm-hmm.
I lost in the finals to Connor 3 years in a row. And on the fourth year, I finally beat him. And I was just like, that was the best one ever. And I was like, yes, finally got him. And the nice thing about that was that in the previous years, even though I lost, even though I was so frustrated and wanted to wring his neck at the end of the fight, at dinner, we could still sit down and be like, that was awesome, right? That was a great fight, right? Like, that was a great thing. We elevated everyone in that tournament, right? So eventually I climbed the ladder and I won a ton, and it's still awesome. But it got to the point where I could win while a lot of tournaments while getting to maybe 80% of the performance that I needed, right? Like I could win and just get up there. But if there was a Connor in there, if there was a Boomy on a hot streak in there, or if there was someone else in the tournament that would make me crank it up, I'll be like, all right, I know that I have to take it up a level in the finals or when I get to the finals of this tournament. And that is actually probably where I struggled the most um, it would have been easy a lot of times to take my foot off the gas mentally and just be like, I don't really care if I win or not. But I did care because it was just it was awesome, and or I didn't want to like lose. I hate losing too, right? And so a lot of times I would struggle more in the do I really want to put in the effort to take my game up to A plus range to win this tournament? And I overcame that struggle. There's Connor.
There's
There
Connor.
he is.
Since we keep referencing Connor, that's
Yeah,
the tall one in this photo.
yeah, he's the tall one. Um,
Anyways.
and so after that, the other struggle was, and I struggled. Boomy talked about this too. I started having physical issues. Right, I had basically no more cartilage in my right knee. Um, so I would struggle with physical pain, and I would be like, I could just take it easy in this tournament. I could still be, still go out and have fun with my friends. However, there were some up and coming people that I really cared about, who I'm sure they're still around. They're actually most of them are mods now. I really cared about. I really wanted them to do well, but I knew if I entered the tournament and didn't fight my best, right, and they beat me, they wouldn't be beating me at my best, and so I couldn't. It's maybe this could be probably a pride thing, but like I couldn't besmirch their victory by fighting less than my best. And so the mental struggle of overcoming the pain and fighting at A plus range to bring their competition level up, and if they beat me, to have that be a legit feather in their cap, right? To be that guy that they chased and actually beat, right? I had to that was a mental hurdle for me to get over, and it's pushed myself even as my body was saying no, don't do that.
Right.
So that kind of brings me to up to where we are now. So as you can see, I'm a little bit different than other people, in that I enjoy the excitement and I enjoy the pressure. That to me um, does that. And when I was first starting, I talked about how like I was dealing with the inconsistency. I learned to practice being in tourney mode at practice, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more when we get into the other stuff. Um, but yeah, so that's where I learned that. That's where I learned to practice being in tourney mode at a practice, which I think is very important. Do you guys have any questions? I know I just talked for a long time.
I mean, like,
Yeah, go ahead, Rowan.
sorry, when it comes to like the anxiety and stuff, even though I said I was sick, I liked it still. And I think that that's something I try to drill into people is like you might have some negative stuff happen in your body, but you can still enjoy it. Like you can be nauseous with anxiety and having a great time. Like those both can be at the same time. And they are for me anyway. I also prefer those champs fights and stuff where there's a ton of pressure and you're of
Sure.
Yeah.
there's no way you can turn it down in that moment.
Yeah. I mean, the adrenaline dump sucks, but the adrenaline high is amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I think we clearly all like it, right? Like even if we say like it's very nerve-wracking or it's stressful or whatever, right? But like keep coming back to do it. So
Well, let's
there's
let's get into that. Let's get into that, right? If something's not difficult, or if something's easy, it's worth less doing, right?
Yeah.
And we should be under no illusions that having a good mental fighting game is easy, right? It's a difficult thing to get through, but stress and difficulty don't necessarily mean misery, right?
No.
Right? Like doing hard things, the reward at the end is so much better. And also, I think one thing that makes us all friends, for sure, outside of fighting, is going through that struggle, right? Like we bond over that sort of struggle to make it to the top,
Yeah, I
right?
agree with this.
Do you guys agree? I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, I 100% agree. Like it definitely
How
is
dare you say
bonding
you're my
and
friend?
what's that?
I'm memeing. You go ahead, John.
Um, Yeah, like it is definitely like I definitely became friends with Boomy when he gave me a loss in a tournament. Uh, and I was like, it was luckily it was the revenge tourney at Gulf Wars so you could refight. So I did refight it and I did beat him and then I won that tournament. But I was like, this is not acceptable. But also like he
This
must
is
be.
not acceptable.
But but like we kind of bonded over talking about like the tournament fight, right? Like, and we became like there's also a friendly rivalry too, right? Like that's how
Okay.
became friends with probably everyone here, honestly.
Well, John, I
Was
think I
really
think you and I became friends when I just randomly decided to coach you or corner you in a tournament.
yeah. It was the East Kingdom tournament at that I also won.
Nice.
Yeah, and you were I don't know you weren't maybe you weren't fighting in that or
I don't
something,
think
and
that's
you just
right. Yeah.
and I was about to fight someone. I was about to fight someone. I think it was a black tiger, and I was like, I think I was like, what do you think I should do or something? I can't remember. It just came up, and you just gave me some advice, and I went out and it worked, and so
Yeah.
and then we
Oh
bonded
yeah.
over that.
What were you saying,
Uh,
Boomy? I didn't mean. I think we interrupted you.
Oh, I wasn't in the middle of a thought. I was just type into the chat.
Oh, okay.
You mentioned pain during fighting.
Mhm.
A cool benefit of having a mental game that you can really control, and like pretty much when I'm talking about mental toughness, I'm talking about just being able to control your mind. Like that's really all it is. You're controlling your emotions, you're controlling your mind, and you're getting them to a place where you perform well. And to me, as somebody who deals with chronic pain, the mental toughness aspect of it can also help with that. And it's maybe not the healthiest way physically, but I will at a fight or at a tournament tune it out because I have to. So coming up on the field, if I'm experiencing my back pain or my joint pain or whatever the hell's going on,
Mhm.
that's going to take me out of the fight. But if I can just, if the world melts away and the only thing in front of me is my opponent, the pain melts away for a little while too.
Mm-hmm.
So,
After the fight, hurts like crazy, but during it, it needs to go away.
so the mental toughness for me in that specific scenario is different, right? So you I'm not saying this you're wrong or anything, but this is different for me, right? So for me, it'll be the pain will be there and I'll be in the fight and it'll be like, oh, if I do that, it will hurt.
Ooh.
The mental hurdle for me is do it anyway,
Oh,
right?
cool,
It is
cool,
fight through the pain, right?
cool.
So it's I really haven't mastered the block the pain out thing, but the mental toughness of do it anyway is the struggle for me. All right, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about what is the connection between the mental game and the physical game. Okay, so I mean, growing up, I talked about it a little bit earlier. Growing up in fighting, I would a lot of inconsistency. Right, I would fight good one day and bad the next day, and I would try to figure out how to fight my best. So what is you guys' opinions on what the connection is between the mental and the physical? Bloomy, let's start with you.
When you ask that question, do you
Mhm.
specifically mean um, like being introspective about your body in the middle of an action, or I suppose I don't know what the specific side of the question you're asking.
Okay, so there's we should explore all the sides of the question, but having a good mental game means winning a fight,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or winning the most fights that you can. Okay, winning a fight is a physical act, right? So what is the connection between fighting well with via your mental game and the physical aspect of the things that you're doing?
Okay, chat and folks here in Discord. I think for myself, the thing that I strive to achieve physically is to have everything as tight as possible, all of the fat trimmed off of all of the actions as much as is possible, and have all of those actions be in my lizard brain as my automatic reaction. None of that needs or should come to the forefront of my mind. In the forefront of my mind, I only want what is my opponent doing right now? What I think what have they done in the past, like within the last few seconds, and what are they going to likely do? Right, that's all I really want to have brain space for. And ideally, I want to kind of black out everything else. I want it to be as essentially like I can't actually keep up with my own body's movements mentally during a fight. it's only footage afterwards, or if I take the time to sit down and picture it in my head, can I give a much better explanation of what happened? But during the blur, I can't even vocalize. It's going way too fast. And so I strive to be in mostly operating on the subconscious. Hopefully that makes sense. So there's not, the connection isn't, the connection is trained outside of a tournament.
So, so the things that take mental effort, I guess, right, inside of a fight are what? They're recognizance, right, of what your opponent is doing or the situation you're about to be in. Right, here comes a shot, got to parry, got to attack into the parry or whatever the response is. Okay, then identifying what your response could be. So recognizance, identification, right, and then precision. I think is a big one, right? If I'm tuned in mentally, my precision is a lot higher than if I'm just reacting or if I'm off my game. Um, right. So that kind of thing, right? Like being in the fight and identifying the situation, reacting to it. I think those are big physical things that affect the
Do
mental
you
side.
actively think about those things during a fight? I don't, which is why I ask. Like, I
Yep.
genuinely do not think about any of those things in the context of a high pressure, high level fight. The only thoughts in my brain are very specifically, what is their past action? What do I think I can predict about their future action? And can I
Okay,
line
but
that
when,
up in
when
my
the
mind?
action happens, then what?
I'm sorry.
Well, when the action happens, then what?
Essentially,
Oh, I
I go
just
into
triggered myself.
a blur in my mind. Like, I can't actually keep track. I'm just doing, and then something happens, and then I have time to catch up after the interaction. Like, I physically
Okay.
cannot, like, my brain just cannot keep up with what is happening with my body in the lizard brain.
So a lot of people would call that muscle memory, right?
Oh, 100%, absolutely. It's a neuromuscular connection, having seen enough reps and processed it enough times.
What about you guys? Do you guys see a blur?
I feel like I experienced it very pretty similar to how Boomy describes, where it's like you're sort of setting yourself up to be in the right spot,
Mm-hmm.
and then you kind of have to just let it go on autopilot, or at least be subconscious, because it's like conscious thought is too fat, it's too slow, right? Like when someone's throwing a shot at you, I don't think, oh, I have to parry and then I should riposte. You should just be able to say, I'm going to parry riposte, and like just you're triggering an action.
Okay,
Um,
but no parry you've ever done has been exactly the same.
sure, sure, but you've trained it enough to where you're mostly reacting like it's still faster than conscious thought, right? Like I'm just moving, need to get that blade way out of my line, right? Like I don't need that, I need that to not touch me. And you've done that enough times that you know that you can just do it.
But
Or if
you
it's
And
still, so it sounds to me like you're talking about sort of like you've done it enough that you don't have to spend a ton of mental cycles on it, right? Like it's
no,
just
yeah,
natural, right? It feels
yeah,
natural. You still have to
and
identify.
yes, obviously, yeah, and I think a part of another part about the mental game that is physical is being able to switch between parts of your fight that you're focusing on, right? So like we were talking about, like you're not putting a ton of thought into the dagger, but as soon as if there's a shot coming, you're like, I'm going to defend that sword, and as soon as you defended it, then you're going to might switch your head to now thinking about how to hit them, or you're going to say, I'm going to pick a target, and you're going to hit that, right? Like, and you're just being able to, and then once you picked a target, you hit it, or you didn't hit it, and then you switch your brain back to defense, right? Being able to switch between what part of the fight you're thinking about or putting focus on in a moment is also like, because we know that humans can't multitask, right? Like it's not possible.
Right.
But what we can is we can switch between different tasks very quickly. Um, and then trying to make it as much of it as autopilot as possible, right? So like you're thinking tactically, not mechanically in a moment, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I need to
Tactical
attack
versus mechanical, for sure.
here at this time, at this moment, not like you're not thinking about how the form of your lunge is or your footwork is good or whatever. You're just thinking, I need to be in that spot.
Yeah.
I need to defend this attack. I need to make this action, and when to do it and why to do it.
So I'm a little different. Like to me, it would seem to you guys like a real time strategy game, right? As opposed to a blur, I see movement and space, and I don't really think about necessarily the actual actions, but I'm like, oh, there is an opening, right? And I can hit that opening. That is going through my brain constantly. Right, here's the space, here's the angle, here's the opening, here's what he's going to do next, try to predict, right? So all of that is going through my brain at the same time. Mentally, what that allowed me to do was to it changed my game a little bit the better I got at it, right? Because I would throw a shot and then second intention and then third intention. I could just stay in that zone, that sort of B range fighting. That's why I like to be there, right? Because I can see and having that being engaged, I find way more success there than just being on autopilot. Rowan, what about you?
I admit I'm more similar to Boomy and John as far as the only time I could really think through a fight like you're describing, where you see an opening and you can like kind of
Mm-hmm.
semi-consciously think through it, is if I'm fighting a fighter that's a lot slower than me.
Okay.
So if I'm fighting somebody I'm a lot better than, I can work through things, and that's a very fun way for me to practice.
Mm-hmm.
But a high-level tournament, I can't do that. I think I'm just maybe my battle computer isn't fast enough to process that. Like you've described it to me before, and it sounds amazing. It's something I don't feel capable of doing. Um, the way when you asked the question initially, my interpretation of it was when you go into a fight and there's like a little thing that's causing a small distraction
Okay.
as far as the mental and physical connection, because I have seen that in myself of show up to a fight and have a very small distraction that shouldn't really be enough to bother me,
Mm-hmm.
but it makes me physically much slower.
Okay.
I've
So
had that happen a lot. So
What's
that's
an
been a
what's
particular
an
place,
example?
like
Yeah, what's an example
crowd
of like
watching.
crowd watching? Okay.
That
crowd
was a
work.
huge one for a long time. It just anything that kind of gets me slightly focused on the outside. I perform worse in tournaments where it's a little chaotic and like we don't have a very rigid marshals calls lay on all that fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So a shotgun tournament
I like
perform a
it.
lot worse. Part of my brain is thinking about where the other fighters are. Part of my brain is slightly distracted and I physically move slower. You can actually see it in video that I just underperform every time
So
unless I can really clean it up.
that's something. Well, clearly, it's something you should work on, right?
Yeah.
So my question was more like if we're trying to teach someone how to build a mental game, a strong mental
Yeah.
game, right? Like what is going to be hampered when your mental game is off, and what is it going to be enhanced when you're focused in, right? So boomy being like being able to recognize and react without even thinking about it, right? That if he's not in that mode, it's slower, right? It's less precise, right, boomy, right? Like that's like if you're not in that mental game, right? Like what physically are you looking to enhance with your mental game is kind of
Okay.
the question. Well, these are all excellent points, awesome points, right? Like this very fascinating difference in mentality. Um, so as far as like the muscle memory thing, the way that I know that I've learned something is that if I can utilize it in a fight inside of my battle computer, right? Like
Okay.
deliberately as opposed to reactively. That's when I know that I've learned a specific thing.
I
But
have
that's good.
no, sorry. I was just thinking about trying to answer your question as far as like working with people on their mental game. A time when this did come up, it came up partially for me, but then also somebody I was working with is that they were getting too excitable, like too overeager,
Okay.
too pushing the envelope, and
So,
so they're mentally like too hungry, too in it, which made them kind of jump the gun and like not defend themselves, and it was a different side of their mental game being in the wrong place.
okay.
And that physically affected them. They were jittery, they were bouncing around, they were like
John, you this too, right? You talked about how you got too high, right?
Yeah.
What does that physically feel like? And then what is the outcome of that? Like what do you if someone is struggling with that, what is the physical things that they're gonna manifest?
Yeah. So for me, and this is a lot better now, but like still sometimes when I feel that anxiousness, it'll almost feel like I'm super anxious, but also like super tired at the same time. Like I feel like I don't have, and I feel like I don't have the like I feel clumsy. Like my hands don't work, my legs don't work. Um, there's just like too much going on, and I can't like calm down. Um, and so I feel like my coordination is off. Um, and then like I can't get like sometimes this definitely just happened. I'd like run through. I remember a champs fight I had where like I couldn't get out of my head that I was gonna lose, and I did lose. Like I just was like kept thinking we're gonna lose this fight. You're gonna lose this fight,
How
and
did
I
you
could.
lose? How did you lose?
I think I got my hand taken, and then I think I lunged. I think I overextended, and he parried me out and hit me. There's video of it somewhere too.
No, but like you overextended, right?
Yeah, like I
Right.
couldn't. I was making poor tactical decisions too, right? Like I think I wanted to just get the fight over with. That happens too to me sometimes too, where I'm like, well, I gotta do something. I can't just sit here. Like,
Mhm. But
um,
patience, right? You
yeah,
lose patience when you should have
learn
patience.
patience. Yeah, actually a really big one for me. Is I start to get impatient, which I'm not very patient in general.
Yeah,
Um, and that was a big development actually, is learning to be a little more patient as a fighter.
Mhm.
Like, definitely helped my like super high in fighting because I was good enough for a long time that I didn't need to be patient. So it was
Sure.
only a couple like certain types of fight that I needed to learn to be patient with. But if I was patient, like if I couldn't kill someone quickly, then I would get anxious again because I'd be
Sure.
like, well, this is going too long.
Yeah, yeah,
What's
yeah.
happening? And I'm like, this should happen. Something should happen, and then I just make bad choices, bad tactical decisions, like overextend, take shots I shouldn't. Um, like if my
Yeah.
shot selection would get poor, I guess would be
Not,
better. Maybe
not
a better way.
selecting very poor, right? Not thinking
Yeah,
tactically. Yeah.
yeah. But the big physical one is just like feeling like my hands and legs aren't like working right, and then
Okay.
feeling like this kind of weird, anxious, but also fatigued. Like it's a lot of
Mhm.
energy, but also like tired,
Yeah. Sure.
which is horrible to feel. And so like I'm glad that I've mostly gotten able to like keep that from being happening as much, but it was
Right.
definitely a
So
long
you lose focus. You make tactical slow down.
tactical poor
Sluggish.
decision, slow down, coordination loss.
Yeah.
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 Um,
Listen,
and
we have
there's
some. Good. Good.
I was gonna say there's definitely ways like learned like if you that I learned to like is I was starting to feel those things like ways to catch myself from going there, right? Like
Okay.
um I focus a lot. This is actually a physical thing. I focus on the feeling of the way my weapons feel in my hands. Like
Mm.
to me, the weight of my sword and dagger are actually comforting. Like it's like almost like a like I have a very positive association with them. So like even sometimes when I'm just like at a tournament, I pick my weapons up. I just feel so like if I'm feeling nervous in the middle of a fight, sometimes I'll just kind of like try to focus on the feeling of my weapons, and that'll help me. Before this is uh, somewhat of a beginning of a fight thing. When they say lay on, I will always salute with my dagger, and I'll always make sure that my dagger touches my mask, like just actual physical
Oh, okay.
contact.
So the
Uh,
tactical feel of a mask, but boop.
Yeah, and that feels. And so sometimes if I'm feeling bad, even in the middle of the fight, I'll kind of redo that. Like I'll step out, break measure, and kind of like recenter, and then come back in.
Okay. It looks like we have some questions in the chat, reference to what no mind is.
I have opinions.
Boom,
Can you
you've
elaborate on
been
what you mean by too specific, Rowan?
So from at least from the way I'm reading the chat, um, you're asking no mind for tournaments and practices used for getting the techniques down, and wonder if you're all finding better ways than no mind for tournaments. It looks like an indication that, or Mogo's saying that no mind is kind of the only way to fight tournaments, which I don't agree with. Um, I could be wrong, and I want Mogo to pipe up if that's not what they intended.
he does make a distinction of no mind for tournaments and then practices being very conscious, right? Which I mean, the contrast of practice and tournaments is something that we all sort of acknowledge, and we probably should discuss more.
But specifically, if you open up no mind, it talks about being free of thoughts like anger or fear. And I don't like to go down this road because people like to say that being without anger or fear is a better way to fight. However, I've met plenty of people that fight angry and that's their best performance. Plenty of people that fight happy and that's their best performance. So the concept that emotion is negative is not how I train mental toughness. It's not how I do mental toughness.
Well, okay, but in the very beginning, when you're first starting, right, and your fight is affected by your mood, right, which happens, right. So I think that developing the push everything out and only focus on the fight is a base skill that you have to learn. um, because it can affect you negatively.
I'm going to disagree. I'm
Okay.
going to disagree. Because, at least from training it, there's no reason to focus on pushing out first because people could take their best performance and their worst performance and compare them to each other and then just keep the good parts and leave the bad parts. So for that individual, if no mind works best for them, if pushing that stuff out is what they need to do, that's what they need to do. But
Everyone
I'm
on
never going to tell someone to do that.
everyone on here has said that they push things out. The very beginning, you, John, and Boomy all said, I got to push things out and only focus on what's in front of me.
Push out distractions, but I don't necessarily push out emotions. I embrace the anxiety and I embrace the fear.
I think
Okay.
I'm not emotionless for sure.
I think to Dom's point, I actually like when I'm running those scenarios in my head, I like people see me like they're like, why are you always fighting with a smile on? This goes for every discipline. They're like, why are you grappling with a smile on? Like you're being choked. And
That's
and like so people who are like, hey, why are you so happy doing it? I'm like, I'm with Dom in that like I feel very happy. I feel the pleasure of being able to do the thing in the moment. And so to I think I agree with him in that I feel right before and right after. But in being present in a fight for me means that I don't actually even bother to process the emotion that's happening. It's not like it's not there. The emotions that are or are not present. It is merely they are just much like your pain, like the feeling of pain. Like I'm not even tuned into the feeling. It's not that it's not there. It's just that my brain is so in the present about the fight at hand. It really does melt away. I think for me, the emotional side as well. Not that it goes away, because the second the fight is over or something happens, all of that floods back. And in fact, that's why I hate when people disrupt the flow of fight unnecessarily, like where the marshals call a hold when you're kind of near the fence.
Hold when you're like,
Yeah,
oh my God, you're near the fence. Oh my
yes.
God.
Yep. We have all seen that specific where like it breaks that zone that you're in, and then all of a sudden you're like, man, I'm out of it now. Like I have to like refocus, and it's going to take me time or effort to get there. Anyhow, that's
Okay, so
my take.
that's going to bring up a tangent that I want to go on into in just a second. But to Rowan's point, I wasn't saying that they should not be emotional in a fight. I should say I meant one of the hurdles that you go over is figuring out how to not let your external factors negatively affect your fight, right?
That is true.
To
Yeah.
use them and to embrace them and to experience them, right? Because most emotional situations, the only way to deal with it is to go through it.
Yeah.
I
I guess the specific way that the way that I try to focus on it or teach it is that like telling somebody to not think of a big pink tree isn't going to work. But if you tell them instead of thinking of that, you're going to think of a big blue cow, it works. So like I tell them instead of saying, if anger makes it harder for you to fight, I can't tell them, well, just push it down, don't be angry.
I'll be angry. Don't be angry.
But I can tell them that if you find an emotion that helps you, foster it. Like put all your focus into building that one up and then let the other one go away or push the other one away, but you're kind of like replacing rather than just suppressing.
Okay. Makes sense.
Maybe I misinterpreted the Mogo's question, but
Mr. Mogo here, I don't know who this is. I apologize. He says, I fight best when I'm laughing, but find mood doesn't to affect trying to keep your mind clear. So my reticence on saying like you already heard me say right. I love being in an emotional fight in a big stakes fight and with lots of stuff surrounding it. I love a big crowd or whatever. However, I also feel like if I can't fight well without a big crowd, then that's a skill issue, and then I need to overcome that and a mental hurdle that I need to get over. Right. So to me, I need to be able to fight the same level, even if there's no crowd, which is a step further. Um, I really kind of want to talk to Boomy about how he gets in the zone in a specific fight and how he kind of ramps up and can get pulled out of that. What is that like, and what is how do you get there, and what does it feel like?
Okay. So to the best of my ability to describe being in the zone, as it were, I would say, to me, my experience of it is there is very, very little forethought, like conscious thought. The conscious thought is it's blurry, it's fast moving, and it's only one moment at a time. I notice this thing, I notice this thing, I notice this thing, and I think this thing's going to happen. Those are about it. And even those are kind of fuzzy because they move by, right? It's ever changing. Every fraction of a second, there's enough factors that change. You have to change that thought process. And other than that, literally everything else, I couldn't tell you where my feet are or where my hands are. I have a general idea of where they should be, but I have to watch footage to give you precision. About like I couldn't tell you if my hand was extended enough for a dagger parry until I watched the footage after, because in a moment I can't feel my hand. I don't have brain power to feel where my hand is until there's something that clicks. Like I feel something click my dagger, and that's my go time. And
So what does it feel like when you get pulled out of that?
I have more than one conscious thought, similar to what Rowan is describing, almost exactly, which is like, oh shit, there's a rock in my shoe. This is really annoying. Once that thought hits, everything else falls apart. Like that's like now I'm thinking about something that's completely unnecessary, really irrelevant to the performance in the moment. Whether there is a rock in my shoe doesn't matter. What matters is that my brain went to it. And that's why I very much advocate if you can push someone up against the list fence, but don't push them into the list fence so that they get reset. That's adding that external mental load.
Yeah.
And even though it's a very small thing in the big scheme of things, it is more than enough to shave off a lot of the fractions of a second that you need to kill somebody. Like that happens.
So how do you get back into it if that happens?
I do the ritual similar to John and Rowan's descriptions of a ritual, which is I usually do a big exhale. Sometimes you'll see me jump around and waggle my arms. I'm telling myself to release all tension in my body. And then when I get into guard, I've been doing the like I set my hands, like I flick them into place now. We were pointing it out last night. I thought it was kind of funny. That's 100% a Torah rub-off. Because he's like,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
You know, we flick our hands into place, ready to go. And I always salute my opponent 100% every time. To me, it's the same thing as like, dabbing up an opponent for grappling. Like there's a ritual to like consensual violence, which is what it is. It's like the ritual of, okay, we're both in this at this moment.
So duly noted. Throw rocks at Boomy's feet when he gets in the zone.
It really could take me out. Just those little things.
And I want to add a piece to this real quick because I think this is some advice I read in an article one time that I thought was talking about a tennis player talking about developing like a routine before they play, before they served.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking a lot about routines for like, touching your mask, whatever. I think it's good to have routines before your fight, but I also think you should make your routine short and flexible because maybe you don't have the time and opportunity. Like if your routine is like, I need to spend 5 minutes, like, like I need to go walk around the field once and, pray to the gods or something or whatever, right? Like you're not always going to be able to do that in every tournament format. So having something that's having something that's real quick, like Boomy's little like, I'm just gonna flick my dagger a certain way, or I'm touching my mask once, or whatever it is, right? Then that means it's really easy. You can always do it, and it's very flexible. Because there's also sometimes where like maybe a fight you maybe there's a tournament format where you do have the flexibility to take your time with your routine, but maybe you feel like your opponent looks tired, and you like maybe it's between passes, and you don't want to give them time to rest, and so you like want to rush them a little bit, or maybe you want to take your time and like kind of draw it out. And so being able to have the flexibility to choose that depending on tactical considerations.
Okay, so what you're talking
useful.
about is a known psychological technique. I forget the name of it, but what you do is you develop the routine to get into your headspace, right? And then you use a physical anchor to trigger that, right?
It's literally called anchoring.
Is it? Okay.
It's called anchoring.
Okay, anchoring. So Boomy's reset, right? Even though he's only taken like half a second to do that, right? The process and thing behind it exists, right? And he goes through that even though he's only doing a quick motion. So that is something that you can't just do in the moment, right? You have to develop that and figure that out beforehand. What that is to get you in your own fighter mindset, and then make an anchor for it, right? Like we call it anchoring. Yes, anchoring. Thank you, Boomy.
Anchoring, yeah. No, that's good. It's good to have a name to it because I've done this for forever, and
Yeah.
I
I
never
don't
put
have
a
one.
name to it.
Never needed one.
Oh, So I appreciate the terminology.
Well, and I think I actually think that it's like I was kind of like what I was kind of getting at is like if you don't have one that and you don't need it, that's actually not a horrible thing because then you're
Yeah.
more flexible in how you approach it. And if you do need to develop an anchoring technique, then I would recommend something short and quick
Mhm.
because it's
For
you
sure.
can then so don't make it
Actually,
be like
Maybe
real long.
without stopping your fight.
I would expand it on top of that as far as if you can have multiple anchors, it's even better. Because the more anchors you have, the more you have access to them. So you can have a word, a little movement, a smell, or whatever. It could be the smell of your glove, whatever. But the more anchors you have, the more you can get your mind back into there. Because if you don't need any anchors, that's the best. That's the best option. If you can go back into your mindset with nothing, that's ideal.
Make your
But
anchors
for
so
us mere mortals,
Easy.
um, uh, adding them on top of each other means that if one of them is missing or for some reason you can't do one of them, you still have the other ones. Like you can always say this little word in your head, even if you don't have time to do a big salute or whatever.
So you
That's
anchoring same thing with different anchors, or you anchoring different things?
You can anchor different things or you can anchor the same thing. You set it up with mental like visualizations and mental practice way before the event happens.
I have a question for you guys.
Mhm.
Um, during your anchoring, does it need to be true? Do you need to feel like whatever it is that you say to yourself is true? Let's exclude the physical action. Like for instance, in the case of John's, it's just business. Even though he might like, I don't know, John, you can elaborate on this. Like, what if you feel, say, anxiety or nervousness, and actually don't feel like I can just take care of business in this moment? Um, does saying that still help? How much, etc.?
Um, that's why I kind of feel like Rowan has a real good point about the having the anchors be different because like sometimes one might not work depending on the situation. So like maybe you do feel like to be honest, like a lot of times I don't say the whole it's just business thing in my head if I'm fighting someone that I think is like really, really, really good because that kind of isn't just business and almost like that
Yeah,
might be actual like personal.
this is serious.
And
Yeah.
that one it's more like I have to like psych myself up to be like kind of the dom like this is awesome, right? I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna beat this person um because I'm great as well. So like that's almost like a little bit of a slightly adjust in my attitude. Like it's still kind of business, but it's also like it's a bigger deal for some fights. And
So
it sort of depends on what I need in the moment. So I guess I guess it does have to be somewhat true, and I change it, adjust kind of what I say to myself
Okay, so you
depending on the
couldn't like
situation.
full false bravado it. Like, say you're fighting someone fighting up, like at a time when you had people to fight up and they had a big gulf, right, between you and the person in the moment. Like, I didn't know if you could like basically give yourself enough false confidence to
Yeah,
go in to
I
perform your best, regardless of
I
outcome or
usually
statistical outcome.
yeah I usually approach that with a more logical like have a plan. What I was talking about is like if I'm fighting someone that I think, especially at a point that I see feel like someone's better than me. Um, I'm like then I like really focus on my strategy because that gives me more confidence because then I'm like, well, if the strategy works, then I'll win, right? And so it makes it feel doable.
Right, right,
Um,
okay.
and so I kind of focus on that more. Not to say there's probably always a little bit of false bravado, but it just like it depends on. I can't quite get all the way there. I think with that, I need a little bit of like logic for me.
Yeah,
So I
well,
know this question really wasn't directed at me because I don't really have anchors so much. Um, but as far as the false bravado goes, part of my development in my mental game was rejecting that it was false. Um, because one of the keys for me is moving between practice and a tournament mindset, right? Separating those two. And part of that, a huge part of that is that is Occam's razor, right? Like the simplest action to get the victory is the correct one, right? So when I was fighting up, right, even if their skill outstripped mine and their experience outstripped mine, right? To me, I always had to have it in my mind that, even if they're outclassing me, right? There is still the possibility that I can do something simple and do the simple well and still get the victory, right? That to me was a huge mental development piece for me to increase my mental game and my skill level is always having that positive. I can still get it, even if I had no business thinking that, right? No business thinking that, but I still had to have that mental focus going in of like, hey, there is a chance. There not a chance. Chance is the wrong word. There will be an opportunity for me to get the victory here, even if they're more experienced and better or fucking taller and left-handed or something. If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. It's good. It's good to hear different people's approach. It's interesting because like Rowan's approach is very interesting to like hear the inside thoughts of like enough anxiety built in, which I know that's there. It's just like interesting to kind of witness the process.
What physical things do you guys do to prepare for a big tournament?
I change nothing. I keep my body in as tip top shape as I can year round because it's a quality of life thing. That's my answer.
I mean, day of.
Day of nothing. Get a good night's sleep. Eat well. Like just general like care
I
maintenance.
don't get a good night's sleep or eat well. I just drink a white monster and then I jog. That's it.
White Monster has so little caffeine.
Sorry, it's just I like it. That's the one I want.
3 White Monsters would be better.
Okay. John, you're muted.
Are you muted,
John, you're
Nice. I'm
Thanks.
muted.
Sorry.
Oh, there you go.
I was gonna say, what about 4 Dr. Peppers? It was just a joke, but
4 Dr. Peppers. There we go. You guys have
um,
any pre-game rituals to get you in the headspace aside from like anchoring in the fight itself?
yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, the good night's sleep and everything is like obviously a very good answer, and like the mostly just trying to not get too nervous for me. Like that's the big one. So like definitely go through in my head everyone I'm fighting, that I'm worried about. I
Okay,
like
let's
to,
talk about that. Let's talk about that. When I go to a tournament, part of the awesome part for me is the process, right? Of
yeah.
double a limb and seeing the tree and or if it's a bear pit, right? Making sure that I get as many as I can and checking the score when I go over to the table and whatever, right? And then I'm looking at the tournament, and strategizing for them specifically, and getting and more than that, watching them to see how they're fighting.
Mhm.
Like I can tell if someone's off their game or having or someone's on a burner, right? And you got to like be more careful about them. Um, do you guys find that helps or is a detriment to your mental game the day of? Because I've heard a lot of different sides of this, and for me, the more info I have and the more I'm into the process, the better it is. But that's not the same for everybody. So what are you guys' thoughts on that?
Um, I'll take this one. Yeah, I definitely like to do what Dom is describing here too. Like I like look around, see who's fighting, how they're moving, who's there, right?
Mhm.
Like because you never know. You might have an idea of who's gonna show up, but maybe someone's visiting from out of kingdom, or some fighter who used to be awesome, has showed up in his first time in 5 years or whatever, but they're still gonna be great because there's some legend or something, and so you have
Edward?
to be careful of them, or yeah. Um, or you're watching a fight and you're like, man, this guy got better since last time
Yeah,
I faced
that's a good
them.
one. Yeah, yeah.
So you can't rely on previous information. Previous information is always useful. Like you could, but you have to assume you have to read in the moment, right? Like you could watch someone fight the round before you fought them, right? Like watching someone fight, they come out, they fight you, but maybe they have a special strategy to fight you, and they just have a completely
Very
different
different.
approach
Yep.
to how they fought the person before you. So you still have to be ready to adapt. But no, I like to get a feel for how everyone's going, how everyone's doing that day. I don't do. This is actually an interesting question. I don't do any warm up fights. Like I don't do any pickup fights anymore for
Okay.
rapier. I like to just. I might pick my weapons up, my sword and dagger, and just kind of move them around. Feel good in my stance. Do maybe a couple of like advanced retreat steps. But I don't do any pickup fights before a tournament.
What about
I
you?
don't like. I don't like the way it. It makes me more nervous actually.
Dom and Rowan, do you guys do pickup fights prior, or do you not like it? Because I'm on the opposite
I
side
don't.
of John.
I do.
Okay.
Two reasons. Two reasons. First, heart rate. Heart rate is like a car, right? And when you get your heart rate up and going into a fight, your car is like a transmission, right? And so you don't want to be on the super accelerating part of your heart rate ramp up curve in the middle of your first fight. So I want to get my heart rate up at least a little bit, and so when I jump up to the intensity of the fight, it's not a huge ramp up as far as physical goes. So that's one reason I do warm up fights. The second reason is for the past 6 or 8 years, I haven't had a local practice. So I don't really like practice on the regular or fight regularly. So I go to a tournament and I haven't fought in maybe months, like a month and a half or 2 months or whatever. So I mean, I'll admit to some anxiety going out and doing like a pickup fight. Like, man, am I still good? Like, can I still do that? Just because I haven't done it so much. So yeah, those are two reasons that I do try to get a good number of pickup fights in before tournament.
I did it at Namir. I specifically went out and warmed up for partially the reason Dom stated, which is just getting my body warmed up, physically warming up my higher heart rate,
That's so important at Amir.
blood
So
flow,
cold.
all that. Yep. And then the other part was, for me, I don't know if anyone else experiences this, but the lighting and the ground matter a lot as to what I can
Oh
get
yeah,
away
yeah.
with. And so I need to feel how damp is the grass, how many bumps are there in this particular patch that I'm going to be fighting in, as well as depending on where the sun is versus indoor lighting, it really changes my perception of measure. I need to readjust. I need to give my brain a little bit of warm up to readjust. And so
That's a
I
good
that's my
point.
do.
those are my reasonings
It's
for
true.
doing it, for warming up.
Yeah, I do. While I don't like doing the fight, I will walk the field. Like I'll walk wherever the list field is. I'll walk over it, look, see like what the best, like how do some lunges on there, like get a feel for like if
Okay,
my
so you're
feet
still
gonna
doing
slide
like
on
that
this.
part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I think
I
that's
do
actually
that
a
too.
really important part
Mm-hmm.
that everyone should do, and it's not that hard. You just go out and look at the field.
If,
Yeah,
you, if
yeah.
you're not doing a pickup fight, if you're just doing that, you should put your mask on. Like
Yeah,
Boomy said, the perception in the sun and the indoor lighting is very can be very different.
Yeah, that
I don't.
crushes me sometimes. Where it's like we're in twilight fighting,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden that like fucks my versus like high noon, or like
I've
definitely
yeah,
definitely
indoor.
put people in the sun too.
Yep, all those
I
things.
guess like I admit that. I mean, maybe this is again just a skill issue, but if I do a pickup with crappy lighting, I can't fix it. It's like if we went to Border March Auto Melees down in Texas, and I was fighting with a guy in the finals of the tournament, and I couldn't see him at all, and so I couldn't adjust to that. I couldn't fix it. So even if I did pickups with that terrible lighting, I wouldn't be able to like make it better.
also
I would just
Yeah,
be
yeah.
sun was
unhappy.
actively the sun was actually setting, so you could have done a warm up fight before that tournament,
Yeah,
but
the
then
sun.
by the time the tournament is over, the sun was different. So
But
Mo got a
anyway,
agree with
for
you.
John.
Oh
wait,
yeah,
say that
John.
again.
There's a question in chat. How did you transition from warm up to no warm up fights? Um, yeah.
Oh, that's a great question because I used to do warm up fights. So I had a feeling there was some period of time where I was doing warm up fights because I had just always done it and people told me it was the right thing to do and everything. And I was kind of like maybe this is maybe I should stop doing this. And so I just picked a small tournament that I didn't care as much about the outcome of. Like not that I don't, I always care. But it was not like Onslaught and Queen's Champion or a big tournament of war or something. It was like some baronial tournament. And I was like, you know what? I'm just not going to warm up for this tournament and see what happens. And I didn't do a warm up fight for that tournament. But I tried to, do a lot of the mental exercises that I normally do, and I walked the field and everything. And so, and I knew that I knew that I was gonna be maybe a little cold and need a little more amp up before the first round. But I went out and I did it, and I didn't feel, it felt okay. And I was like, okay, cool, I think I can do this. And so then I just kind of started, doing more tournaments that way, and it kind of just developed a new routine. And then
What was the physical difference that you could feel or look for? Because
yeah,
that's what's going to help Mogo
yeah.
get
So I
transition going.
definitely felt a little more jittery, like I've described, because I hadn't kind of worked out that uh, like um. But the first couple of rounds for me in tournament, or really the first round, is always the hardest because I'm always like Even when I did warm-up fights, I was always the most nervous, always the most jittery. That was always the hardest, until maybe the finals. Um, but I found that like, so you can do a lot of other than like the actual act of fighting, you can warm up without actually having to do a fight, right? Like Dom talked about his heart rate. Like you could just jog around the field, or even I've seen Dom do some push-ups before a tournament.
Yeah, me too.
So, like, oh, and one time Rowan asked me to hit them in the leg with my sword to like wake them up. Like, maybe they want to go into more detail on that. So, like,
Always
there's a lot of
I learned that the hard way.
I actually, yeah, I did this. I do this exercise with people, and I do it with myself of like compare your best fight and your worst fight.
Okay.
And I was finding a trend that my best fights, I was in like a weird, like a little bit of pain. Like when I won Kings and Queens champs in East Kingdom, I was running, I was jogging ahead of time, and I fucking tripped, and I like skinned both my hands before the tournament. Fought
Jesus.
great.
Yes.
And
Everyone's
so,
chat.
so I went to Pensick,
yeah.
and I had John cut me in the leg, I had Torres cut me in the leg, and I had MT cut me in the leg on different
This
legs,
is right
on
before
for
Ansi, right?
different days.
This is
Um,
not.
By the way, it feels super weird when your student comes up to you and he's like, "Hey, will you just like flat stab me
Injure
in the
me.
leg with your rapier?" And I'm like,
It helps me fight better.
That would be the
okay.
best day ever.
I'll have Dom
Does-
do it to me next time. Now that you're coming back to the
His
States.
stick,
Did
yeah.
you do that right before you fought Ansi this past year?
No, on Steora I did well because I was really angry for bombing it in the tournament right before it.
What was the tournament right before?
So,
Cadets tournament.
Oh, that's right. 'Cause you were
so
already warmed up, and we did watch that.
you're already hot.
I was warmed up and embarrassed.
Okay, okay. I like that. That
Badly
was the
embarrassed.
what you wrote into the answer because you had a stellar performance. I thought.
But that's the underdog thing of like now I beefed it at something I should have aced. So
Everyone, kill everyone.
That is,
yeah, that
that
like
makes
drive
sense.
and that fear and that all that good stuff.
So does does
Um,
that expectation kind of like crush your mental, like where it's like, oh, you are the expected winner.
oh yeah.
In a
Oh, it
particular.
doesn't make me feel like anxious. I just get too comfortable and I get slow.
Okay.
If
Comfortable.
I go in thinking I'm gonna win, I go fight slower.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. No, that's good to like. That's good information. I feel like that's very like reasonable to know about yourself and how
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
adjust
that's
or
what
come
fight
back.
might tell you should win.
I'm gonna add one other thing or two about the warm-up thing. I've been
Yeah.
I do a lot of armored fighting now too. And I do find that I do still do warm-ups in armored fighting because I feel like I still need the like a little more adrenaline, a little more like to remember like because it's a little bit more of a physical game. So you just need to like kind of amp. I need to like a little more of an amp up to be like,
Sure.
yeah, go fuck 'em up kind of like feeling. And I can't quite summon that without a little bit of a warm up fight. So like before this last crown, I did a warm up fight. It also kind of is the person I trained with said it was like you got to get like your stupid out too, like
Get your stupid
like
out.
do all the stupid shit, make all the stupid mistakes, and practice fight before, and then go fight. Um, so and I sometimes now will do warm up fights if some of my students ask me to for rapier. So like I
Mhm.
don't do it for myself, and I used to be like there was a while where I'm like I didn't want to, where like I actually think I did worse if I did a warm up fight. um, when I kind of developed a different routine. But now like when someone who's if like Rowan or some of my other students wanted a warm up fight, I would give them one just because like if they wanted it, I would help them out. But
I don't do warm-up fights against good people.
that's also probably a good because the
Yeah.
last thing you want to do to get dumpster right before you go fight a tournament.
Well, the other thing is right when I fight certain people at a certain level, the margin of error is very low, right? And so like it's inches as opposed to 6 inches or whatever. So I usually will go for someone in the mid range or someone I know that that I'm better than. Um, just honestly, like right, I wouldn't want to fight Boomy as a warm up. So something I was thinking about that most of the mental stuff that I like to do is deliberate, right? I don't like to feel like anything's an accident because if it's an accident, then I can't really repeat it.
Yep.
But one thing that I have done several times is come into a fight with exhaustion. Like I didn't sleep the night before. Well, I was traveling, got stranded, and only showed up the morning of the tournament, the fight. Or I was very, very tired, and I did a couple of 4 or 5 years ago. I suffered a lot of insomnia, and I, those were some of my best performances. Um, because like I had just only the brain power to focus on what was happening in front of me,
That's
and
what I'm
so
fucking talking about. Yes.
but that's not healthy, right? Like I want to be able to do that without
Uh,
not sleeping or out like crushing
oh,
myself.
come on. Okay. All right. Just it's fucking one day, right? It's one tournament. Just don't sleep for a night. Go fight in Queens and win it. Come on. It's just
But
one day.
what about a war? You have to tournament every day for a week.
Oh, don't sleep for a week. Come on, you can do it. It's no big deal.
No sleep at Penn.
Don't sleep for a week. Oh yeah, yeah. No, that's not the goal. Is to not have to
God
have.
damn. What I mean is, some people do perform better on less sleep, and so something I don't like pushing on people is saying like you have to sleep, you have to do warm-ups, you have to eat breakfast, all that shit. Because some people,
Okay,
no.
let's transition to that then, right? So now we've talked about what we do and our perspectives and our experiences. Let's shift into how to develop your own mental game and improve your own mental game, right? So what you said there is very key. Is that if it works, it works, right? Now,
Yeah.
the everyone's task, whether they want to admit it or not, right, is to find what works for them and is also healthy and repeatable.
That's the asterisk.
Repeatable,
I
yes.
was like, gear works. Is it healthy?
Yeah, can be.
Yeah.
I know what you mean by gear. Other people might not.
Taking steroids for bodybuilding specifically.
Yeah, right. That
T
is
gear.
that does work.
It does work. It is objectively it works, but there
Oh
is
no.
cost.
I did a funny story. People when I was first coming up, people would say, "Oh, he only wins because he's fast," and I was fast.
Mhm.
But I also didn't start winning until I was precise and fast.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to like borrow someone's like Adderall or like get some speed and like take it before a fight and be like, no, this is fast. You guys need to shut up.
You don't
No,
even know.
I never did that.
God damn.
I definitely wondered what it would be like to fence on Adderall. Like
Yeah,
it definitely
right.
crossed my mind.
Yeah.
So funny.
Anyway, all right. Let's talk about how to develop your own mental game and how to improve your mental fight, prepare, and how to develop your own system. So one of my keys that I always harp on or try to harp on is to be honest with yourself. There is a lot of subtext in the SCA, right? Like, oh, you shouldn't want it as much, or you can't care too much about winning, or you can't be this or that, or you have to be a good steward or whatever. Um, be honest with yourself, right? If you really want to get good and you really want to win, admit that to yourself first of all, right? And understand that there's nothing wrong with it, right? It is how you feel, is what you want to accomplish, and it is something you have to do that. On the flip side, if you're honest with yourself and you're going through all this, it's not a straight line to success, right? When you lose a fight and you lose a tournament, it sucks. Okay. And you're going to hamper your mental development if you make excuses and say, it doesn't suck because I did X, or it doesn't suck because I did Y, or right, I accomplished X, so it didn't really suck, right? When you lose, it sucks. When I lose to John, it sucks. Okay. And you know what we do after that? We go back to dinner or to the hotel and we talk about how much it sucks. And if only I'd have done this, if only I'd have done that, right? That whole entire thing is part of the process, okay, of processing and going through your entire mental game. But being honest with yourself means enjoying the highs and striving for the highs and also admitting the lows and going through those because those build and help you just as much. So that's my spiel on how to start um, working on your mental side.
I super agree with that.
That's
Oh.
it.
I got other shit. I was gonna see if the boys have something else. Fuck.
I don't know if I experience loss in that same way.
Okay.
I understand what you're saying intellectually, but I think my brain, maybe it's like a protective mechanism. I don't know,
Sure.
but my brain like auto defaults to what could I do better next time. It doesn't really give me time to linger on. I feel sad about the loss, or I feel disappointment.
Okay. Sure.
My
I didn't
brain
mean
like
dwell on it. I didn't mean dwell on it, right?
it's like immediately straight to what could I have done better. A lot of times it really is just like, okay, I could have done these actions in this scenario. If I don't know, I'll go get footage,
And you let that motivate you to do
and
them
that
next
drives
time,
me to
yeah?
be better next time. Yep. Just let that drive me as I'm doing the practice to be better, the in between tournaments time.
What you don't do is reframe that as a good thing, right? Or
Yes.
protective.
No, I don't think of it as good, but I definitely use it as. I also don't like. I suppose like I don't feel because I see some people get real sad after a big loss, and I guess like
Mhm.
I think my brain just auto goes into like, okay, it is what it is. It's in the past. I can't do anything to change it. And it's now what can I do about it from that point, and that like
Sure.
happens immediately. Like the second I get tagged, I'm like, okay, what can I do about this to be better next time?
Your grief process is just like boom.
Yeah,
So fast.
I very much like, and like I've experienced grief in other aspects of life, and I have gone through the full grieving
Yes.
process. But I
Sure.
think in this specifically, in this for me, competitive sports, like especially one-on-one sports, that is just how that like the processing happens after. It's like okay,
Yeah.
we're not going to spend any waste in my head. It's like wasting time going through the grieving process. It's like all right, what could I have done? What am I going to do better next time? It's very like utilitarian.
I think the fastest you can get to where Boomy is the best. But there definitely is for sometimes depending on the loss going to be a moment where you just are like I've definitely had losses where I'm like I was super frustrated about it and I couldn't really bring myself to like look at the footage for like a week or so before because it was just too like it just made me too upset like I was too mad and so like I needed to like just take a minute calm down take a week even like calm down and then I eventually did go back and figure out how I lost and worked through it but like it took me some time to get there. um what I never do, and I think is another trap, and Dom mentioned, kind of hit on this a little bit too with the like just fast comment. What you need to do is you also need to, if you do lose, you have to own it, and like it was your fault you lost in a sense, right? Like
True.
you could have been better. So what could you have done differently? Like you can't say like I don't even like saying like my foot slipped on the ground. It's like well I should have known the train better. Like oh I didn't sleep very well the night before. It's like well I should have. There's like there's always focus on the things I can control, which is a double-edged sword because it makes it
Sure.
more painful, but also it means you have control of it, which I prefer. Like I don't like you don't ever want to feel helpless, right? And
Mhm.
so I like to think about like it's always my fault. So like tend to be pretty hard on myself for loot losses, but I always try to frame it in like a motivation, like because like well I need to train harder or figure out something better. Um,
What
but I'm not gonna let
I
I'm
always
not
also
gonna let
like to try to give
excuses.
credit to,
Sorry.
right? Like at the same
Yes, of
time,
course.
right? Like if someone beats me, I'm not going to immediately say my foot slipped or I should have done this or should have done that, right? I immediately say, hey, he did an awesome thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you have to acknowledge. Yeah, and that's I think that's kind of part of it too, because you don't want to say like they won just because fast or whatever. They won because they were better than you
Right.
in
They
that moment.
had a better shot than you at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you need to so you should congratulate them and like give them the props and then uh figure out what you need to do to be better next time.
So yeah.
And
So
that will lead to the most success long term with
yeah.
that mind.
Yeah. So saying it was my fault and owning the mistake that you made doesn't necessarily mean you take away from their skill, right? So
Exactly.
I just want to point that out. That's before we
No, it's a very good point. It's a very good point.
It's
We
a
still
super
want to
good
be good
point.
like be like a good sport about it, right? Like we don't want to
right. Yeah.
like Boomy like and like I hate losing. Like we talked about I fucking hate losing so much. And like Boomy beat me in the Monster Tourney in 2019 with a little bit double to the head.
Yeah.
And I remember exactly how it happened, and I know exactly like, and he earned that win. Like it was a great shot. Um, but it still drove me nuts, and I still needed to like figure out what to do better, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
So
I think
so the first thing I think is to be honest with yourself, right? And own your mistakes and own the um actions of your opponent, what they did, and go as quick as you can from shit I lost to what can I do better and how. And I think the how is the important point here, right? Because being identifying what you did to lose, right, or didn't do to win, as it were. And to Boomy's point, everything has to have a context, right? And the temptation is to overthink a loss, right? Boomy, last time I fought Boomy, he hit me with a lunge to the head, right?
Was it Emir?
What?
Was Emir last one time we fought?
Yes, it was, and my foot slipped. Not really.
I'm on 3 for
Boomy was
3.
just fast.
Yeah, it was just, Boomy was left-handed and tall.
Yeah, he's left-handed tall. Honestly, what I remember most about that part was when he threw the shot. I was trying to get my eyes in the shade because the sun was setting, and I remember saying, "God damn it, the light is doing it," and then he threw the shot, and it was over. But I didn't overthink it. Right, it was a good shot, and it was a one-time thing. Right, so I think the other thing is to develop a process when you're developing your mental game is to develop a process to analyze your mistakes. Right, that was a micro level mistake that I made. Right, I didn't parry fast enough in that moment, or I didn't anticipate him going from retreat to lunge forward quick enough. Right, but I also didn't make a macro decision on my game like, oh my god, I can't parry across my face anymore, and I have to work on that and do that entirely thing. Right, so you have to develop a process to deal with your mental process to deal with your experiences in a tournament, right? Both success and failure, right? Like John, I'm sure you have a process and a mental process you had to go through and develop, right? Um, to analyze your fights and not overthink and not underthink. with that, directly to jail, overcook, undercook, directly to jail.
Yeah. Think just right. Yeah, no, I do a lot. I've filmed, especially when I was coming up. I filmed almost every single one of my tourney fights.
Okay.
Because I was fortunate that my parents had to be there, like legally, I mean, like to meet the SDA rules. So I'd be like, well, here, film my fights, and so I just went over every loss and victory to always figure out what could have been better, and that was kind of process. But also just like replaying the fight in your head before you look at the footage,
Mhm.
and thinking. Yeah, and figuring out whether something right is more structural, like man, like looking for patterns, like I'm consistently losing because I parry across my face is slow, or if it's more just like I made a tactical error in that moment, and I need to make sure I'm just a little more mentally sharp next time or whatever. Like you need to be able to kind of suss through that, and then having other people like
Mhm.
look at the video with you and help you work through that. Like it really should be a kind of a team effort, right?
Oh,
Like it's
absolutely. That was going
hard
to
to
be
do
the point.
yeah, it's hard to do by yourself, right? And I still go over footage. Like I'm a pretty high-end fighter, but I still go over footage with a lot of people on this call. Actually, like go over footage and be like, "What could I have done better?" We try to help each other get better. So it's like it's a constant process.
Boomy, what are you doing?
I'm putting the OODA loop in the middle there. For all those in chat who have not seen this, just do a quick Google. I'm going to cover our face for just a second. But this is how the Air Force does it. And it is just a very simplified version of figure out what's wrong, figure out what you're going to do about it, do something about it, see if there's a problem, do it again. And this is a very good way to approach. If you're ever like essentially in a position where there's not somebody who's coaching you or teaching you, instructing you, who has better experience, then that process is really a useful one. Just going and it's a way to self-learn.
And we are very lucky in our sport in that we fight someone directly, right? So if your OODA loop can be very, very responsive in the, oh, that did not work, or oh, I need to do that better, right? You figure that out really quickly, you get punched in the face with a sword.
yeah, that's it.
So so developing the OODA loop is great. That's something you should Google. Boomy, have you ever read the biography of Boyd?
I have no idea what you're referring
The guy
to.
who developed the OODA loop.
Oh, okay. No,
Oh.
I have not.
No.
So I have it on the bookshelf right there. The guy who developed the OODA loop his story is pretty amazing. The way he cut through the bureaucracy of the Air Force and got that to be implemented as a decision making process. It's actually one of my favorite books. You should definitely check it out.
Oh, well, cool.
It's really cool.
I have a question for you
So
guys.
yeah,
That's
be
relevant.
honest with yourself.
Mhm.
Develop a system, right? I would say get a partner. Even if you don't have a coach, get a partner. Some of the best learning, both mentally and skill wise, I've done with someone who's going through the same level as me, same level of fighting as me. Bouncing stuff off there, him and talking and just being able to verbalize what I'm going through, right? Having someone you can just verbalize what you're feeling and how your mental process went through is very healthy for you. It helps you figure out what you're going through. Um, what are some other things you guys think that people should do to work on their mental game?
As far as like watching people succeed at tournaments, the people who tend to succeed and tend to keep improving, pretty much saying the same thing as you said, but in slightly different words as far as people who look at their own fight and look at how they could do better, even if they win, they don't sit on their laurels. They go like, "Ooh, I wasn't as safe as I could be." They are pushing themselves harder and harder. They also allow their opponent to have the win instead of saying, "Well, you just got in because I was tired" or stuff like that. They always let their opponent own the win and they own their own losses 100%. Those type of people tend to succeed. They tend to get better. So it's a very important part of a winner's mindset, I think.
Is what? Say it in a sentence.
So to own your mistakes and to allow your opponent to own their wins is a really important part of a good winner's mindset, I think.
I would agree.
And it is reflective of all the traits that we generally strive for in our game.
There's a lot of time spent figuring out where your place in the SCA, both on the field and off the field, and being comfortable acknowledging your opponent's victories and your losses, and vice versa. Being comfortable in that process is something we should all work for, and it's always a struggle, right? Like it's not easy, right? No one likes losing, but
Another
it's
piece that I would, sorry, go ahead.
getting comfortable with that process and realizing that that is the experience that we're after, right? Like that is what we are doing out here. We're trying to kill each other, but in the pursuit of killing each other, right? We enjoy each other's company. Also, here's
Mostly.
the book. Here's the book.
Oh, is that the book? Oh, cool. Boyd, your green screen is trying to make it invisible.
Kill it.
Boyd.
We do see it though.
Oh, there we go. Yeah,
No sponsor.
Nice. I'll have to get the audiobook. I think I've read a book in a minute.
Audiobook. Very good. All right.
Another piece that I add though, as far as again, if I'm helping somebody learn how to win tournament fights, is reminding them how much it hurts. Like again, we've already kind of touched on that, but I want to hammer it home as far as even wins can hurt, losses tend to hurt, and it'll hurt forever. And it's sort of something you have to accept and just keep moving forward. The type of people who the first time they lose, they just sort of give up and fall apart. It's going to be real hard to keep winning tournaments. It's going to keep like setting you back a bit. So being okay to lose while also pushing both.
So the what's the word I'm looking for? The anomaly that we fight in, right, is that we fight in a zero-sum game, but we also don't. Right? Like you're in a zero-sum game in that I win or you win. But at the same time, in the tournament and your career is not a zero-sum game. Even if you lose, you can still improve. Right? So not having a balance of those two things is very important for your mental development as far as a fighter. Saying, hey, I lost this fight, but I'm going to improve this way, or I won this one. Here's what I can learn and improve as well, and here's how I can help those that I've beaten, and that kind of thing. That's very important.
I feel like that's its own topic of like how do you change your stages,
Sure.
especially into like when you have been there and have done that, as it were.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So one more thing that I have that I tend to harp on, or that's been key for me, is that there's a phrase that I really picked up on. It's called, calm is a superpower. So being able to be calm even when you're feeling all hyped up, being able to focus and being able to just be calm even if you're doing something super intense, is something that you can develop in yourself, and it is massively beneficial when you're trying to win a fight, especially a high pressure fight. Um, Being able to acknowledge the pressure and still be calm is something that has helped me a ton. I don't know if that's the same for any of you other
Can
guys,
you
but
define calm or elaborate on calm?
um, define calm.
Yeah, like in this
Um,
context.
I feel like calm is kind of a definition.
Yeah, I can see that.
So hmm, calm's more of a feeling, honestly. Like I can not being. Okay, let me put it this way: being in physical control, of my own body and being able to do anything that I need to do whenever I want to do it. Right. So I'm not hampered by being super hyped up. Like my adrenaline's flowing, but it's not making me be spastic or out of control. Um, Being able to be in the moment at the same time as being excited and being able to slow things down in my brain as much as I need to. Um, I don't know. It's more of a feeling, I guess. I would have thought about it more as a feeling.
Someone someone described it once to me like when I was coming up. They were like like in an action movie or like a western or whatever, and there's like chaos going on, and like the protagonist is like just calm and just like shooting people, just like
Right.
they're it's like no big deal. And I always feel like that's kind of the mental how you want to feel in the moment, right? Like you're just out there doing your thing, and even though chaos is around you, you're controlling what's happening too. So I totally agree with the idea of being calm. Makes sense. It's kind of like just business in a way to me as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's good. Hey, the other, what else? Anybody else have anything else that they like to harp on when they were learning or when they try to help someone with their mental game?
Here's a question to the room, and this may or may not be relevant to the folks in chat, but
Mhm.
hopefully it is a process that you do experience at some point because it's a very good process to go through. Which is have you all felt a prolonged period of um, a lower percentage winning outcome because you're refining an action and you have to unlearn some habits?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like a physical habit? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, just like in the fight in
100%.
the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huge dip
So
for a
you've
while.
always okay. So you feel like you've always built up, Dom, like it's been
Yeah,
additive.
yeah, no, I never went through that.
Okay.
Fucking Dom, dude.
That's
I
why I ask.
feel
I've gone through
It's
it.
amazing.
Every time I find someone who can hand me my ass in a serious way, I go through that. That pretty like where I am willing to commit to like 2 years of just being less good than people expect. Um,
Most of my stuff has been personal, right? Like it took me a long time to beat a certain person or win in a certain scenario. Um, but it was never a like I have to go rebuild a part of my physical game.
oh, I've rebuilt so much
I,
of it. You know, it's interesting.
I
It's
feel
different.
experience similar, pretty much the same to Dom, where like maybe like on a micro level, like over a practice or two, like learning a new thing, like maybe you didn't win as much of that practice, but like never over a long period of time. I've had a pretty good upward trajectory. Uh, and it's weird. It's something I didn't even realize till recently. I looked back and I'm like, man, there weren't even that many. This sounds super braggy, but there weren't even that many like you talk about like peaks and valleys, right? Like plateaus.
Plateaus.
Like
Yeah.
I feel like I break through plateaus pretty well, like for whatever reason. Um, like my biggest plateaus were like it was all mental game stuff actually, which was good. Because I feel like my physical skills just continued to advance pretty steadily, and I never reinvented my game really. It was always just a tweaks as we went along.
That's a good interesting point. Like just to see
Yeah.
who has or
So
hasn't.
50-50 on this call, right? Of
Yeah,
different
yeah,
experiences.
that's interesting. Because
So
I like what 3-4 years ago now maybe. I like I fully reworked some big major overhauls in my fight, and it looks very different than it did 5 years ago, and everything before that, and um, and I went to maybe a year and a half as how long it felt before the new set of actions became more normalized. I didn't lose everything, but definitely took a big step back. And my tournament performance showed that. But now I feel even more strong in the competitive scene.
I guess I could say that like when I started getting injured, I had to change my game a little bit. Um, the but even then, it was sort of expanding it to do more things as opposed to stop doing and reworking to where it would make me lose for a while.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I didn't. That's why I was kind of curious as to if folks had gone through that process.
I really like feel bad when I hear someone go when they have like a failure in a big tournament or something, and they say, "Man, I got to go rework my X part of my game, or I'm gonna start over completely and go through Fabris or something like that." Right? I really feel bad for them, and I'm like, I honestly don't. My natural reaction is that that's the wrong answer. Like that's not the solution that they're looking for. We're not going to get them where they want to go.
Yeah.
But that's highly personal to everyone, and everyone's been through something like that. So I can't. I'm not a good source for this one.
I mean, it really
I do.
depends, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
No, I was saying I do agree with Damas first. Like, if you have a loss and then you try to rework your game, that would not be a good idea. And Boomy, changed his game, but it was all kind of going in the same direction. And when I was changing my stuff, I was going in the same direction. It was under the same style, but like I would usually like overcorrect something. Like my legs were messed up for a long time. And so I'd have to keep tweaking my footwork, but as I was doing that, it would change my range a little bit, which would change my understanding of how far away it was from the opponent. So I'm all in the same direction, but those tweaks would mess me up for a while until I could really fix it. And I'm better on the other side for it, but
Yeah.
it
No.
took a lot of effort for a
Oh
long
yeah.
time and kind of
No
fucked me
doubt.
up for a while.
Mhm. So the other thing that I would say is important for when you're developing your process is being able to um, fight a tournament mindset at practice. Right. That's something we've all kind of hinted at a little bit or touched on a little bit. Very very early on, I started practicing fighter tournament mindset at practice. My opponents didn't always know, but my goal was to have the same level of intensity as a baseline as I would in a tournament fight or high level tournament fight. So that would be my baseline, and I would go up or down from there. And I had to practice that at practice because at practice, like you're working on stuff, right? You're working on your lunges or you're drilling or you're helping someone else out. But I had to do a very deliberate, all right, right now I'm fighting at my maximum level intensity. And at that level, you had to do certain things, right? You had to say, all right, well, even if I'm fighting someone that I'm marginally better than, right? The correct shot is the simplest shot to get the kill, right? And get into that mindset. The not overcomplicate things to make it as efficient and as intense as possible, right? Those kind of switches that I could practice in a fight would bring a tournament fight. That way, it became easy to get to that level as a baseline when the tournament rolled around on the weekend. That's not always it's not easy for everybody, right? That's very different for everybody in their thing. But I found that raising my baseline of intensity in general helped me a lot. What about you guys? You guys similar, or you guys go up and down in your intensity level a lot?
Huh. I never really tried, but not as much anymore. But when I was coming up, I definitely tried to pick certain fights in practice to be like, this fight is real. So like a lot of times would try to make like I always wanted to win the first and the last,
Okay,
and then I'd
that's
scatter
good.
them out through in the middle of a set of fights with people, and I wouldn't tell them. I would just like turn it on and off.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I
Uh,
like that.
Someone pointed out to me, as one of my first teachers pointed out to me, that actually the first fight of a pickup set is the most real because in a tournament you only get one
That's
fight with
funny. I was
someone.
about to
Yeah.
say that
Two out of
exact
three
same thing.
said. Um,
I love 2 out of 3. Oh my
Obviously,
god, so much easier. Jesus.
and in a real sword fight, obviously you would only get one pass too. So
Right.
uh, so they pointed that out. So a lot of people like to do like the last couple is the ones they turn it up for, which I think has value too because you want to be able to like, well, I'm a little tired now.
Yes, your worst
Pick
habits
the
come up.
last, like I want to win the last two or three or whatever. But I try to do that. I also point out that I think it's a good practice and you should definitely do it, but also acknowledge that it's only going to be it's not going to 100% mimic the real thing, right? It's always going to, but a real tournament is going to feel different, and you can't quite ever get. You can get an only approximation of what the real tournament is. At least for me. Maybe other people can get it to feel exactly the same. A real tournament always feels different to me. So I'm trying to just get as close as I can at practice.
Anybody else want to respond to that before
Yeah. I mean,
Go ahead.
I also did practice. I still do practice tournament mode at practice. Either the first three, last three, somewhere in the middle, kind of make sure can I anchor and come back up whenever I want. Because the practicing the switch in and out is actually pretty important. Like, just like we ran into, if somebody calls a hold in the middle of your real fight, you need to be able to get right back in there and perform. You can't let that, you can't let yourself lose because of that. Like, that's a terrible reason to lose. But I would also do in my own head, as well as tell other people, especially if they're injured, is actually practice a tournament in your head at home. Especially if you're capable of visualization. Some people aren't.
I can't.
They could still do it in a similar way, as far as you can sink into the tournament and it feels the same. So even if you don't have pictures in your head, you can get back into it and it smells the same, sounds the same, feels the same. You're back in that zone and you can practice being in there and coming out of it and being in there and coming out of it. You visualize winning your fight, put yourself back into your best performance you've ever had, and just get back in there as many times as you can to help drill it in. I like doing that because I get hurt a lot, so I can't physically fight all the time, but I can always practice my mental game at home through that.
Makes sense. John, the thing you said earlier,
So,
Arn said that exact same thing to me at Adult Swim.
Oh yeah. I think I heard him say that.
Yeah, he was like, the first one is the one that matters. Is the real one to me
Yeah.
because it's
That's
the
something someone told me. Like, yeah, someone told me that when I was pretty new when I got told that at practice one time.
so to clarify, like when you're mentally on, right, your intensity goes up and your precision goes up and everything gets better. What I tried to do with my practicing being in tournament mode was to raise that level where I start from. I know I would never. I mean, it's never going to be the same. I acknowledge that it'll never be the same. But if I can already get to the level of physical intensity easily, then once the tournament hits, then everything goes up from there.
Yeah.
So that's what I try to do at practice. I don't try to necessarily like I can never simulate a crowd at practice. I'm shit at visualization, right? So like I would like practice the physical part of that, and then when I get to the tournament, everything else goes on top of that, and I still start at a higher baseline of precision and intensity. That's the goal anyway. It was the goal.
That's pretty cool.
Also,
I'd never
every now and then you kind of you sometimes like there's a reason to do a tournament fight level at practice. Like either someone asks for it or someone needs
People
a
ask for it.
attitude adjustment
I was waiting for that.
um or I've definitely had it where I'm fighting someone and suddenly like everyone at practice is watching me spar with someone and I'm like, okay, well, like there's a little pressure now to like show a good fight. So
That's bonus, right?
yeah. So there's like reasons to do it, and like in some ways, like I kind of relish those because then it's
Oh,
like extra makes that practice more enjoyable, right?
oh,
So
for sure.
to take advantage of those opportunities, I guess would be the advice.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Uh, uh, don't take advantage of the newbie SmackDown, right? That's its own sort of animal. The attitude
No,
adjustment. The attitude
no,
adjustment.
that's more of a yeah. Like that's not something you should want to have to do. Actually, it's like kind of an unfortunate thing, but sometimes.
All right. So now that we've went through a bunch of stuff on how to develop your mentality, let's talk about how to overcome setbacks. We've touched on it a little bit through here. First, let's go through what kind of setbacks would we talk about, right? What difficulties do we have to deal with that could hamper our that like so mentality being something you use to be tougher and get through things and accomplish things. What are some of the things that could set us back that we would have to overcome, and how do we do that? Because that's a kind of its own methodology, right?
like the day of a fight, like in the moment. Is that what you mean?
Mm-hmm. What sets you back mentally, right? I mean, you've talked about it a little bit, right? Like having a rock in your shoe.
Yeah, being taken out of the zone, as it were.
So what if you get crushed by a newbie? What if you get crushed by a newbie, like randomly? Somebody you really should not have lost to, and you just get absolutely owned. What happens? How do you deal with that mentally? Because that's going to bug you for a while. We've already talked about a good bit of this, right?
Just want to clarify, are you saying about like how to sort of deal with your emotions so you can keep going, or are you talking about like anchors to go back to get yourself back in the fight so you can go further in the tournament?
All of that. All right. So let's do a
Okay.
scenario right now. It's a double limb tournament, and you've lost your first fight. You shouldn't have lost your first fight, and you made a stupid error that you really going to beat yourself. You should beat yourself up about, right? Like, I don't know. You lunged with your blade on the ground or something. I don't know. Or you lunged in general. See, you shouldn't lunge.
Dumb.
Well, how do you what is your process to get yourself back in the mentality, and how do you recover so you can come back and win the tournament, um, even though you've gone you have a loss, right? Because so what is it? That the margin of error is now zero, right? You can't lose again,
Yep.
right? How do you handle that from the mental perspective? How do you go through that? What's your process?
I forget about the loss, but push harder. So forget about the loss, but pretend that everyone I'm fighting against next is the hardest fight I've ever had in my life, which I should have been doing in the beginning.
So you ramp your mental intensity up.
Oh yeah, and then also don't dwell on the one that was past. So that one doesn't exist.
How do you do
The
that?
next fight is the only thing that matters. The fight after that doesn't matter. It's just one at a time.
How do you ignore the fight you just had?
Um, I've practiced doing that through visualization at home. So I've practiced just like I've established the anchors, which I have a class on that, or we can get into it more here. The same somatic anchors as far as like, feeling the weight of your dagger and your sword, or doing your salute
What
to
does
get
that
back into the same zone. But
What does that do for you when you feel your sword, the weight of your dagger?
personally, mine is actually somatic salute, where I look up to the horizon, because it puts me back into the zone I had at my best performance. So everything I do is I just pretend that I'm back in my best performance. So no matter what just happened, doesn't matter. I'm back in the best place I've ever been.
How do you practice that?
I practice through visualization at home, as well as setting anchors through visualization.
No, no, no. I mean, you said an anchor, right? But
Oh my God. No, it's very silly. It's like very circular on my end.
yeah. But
No, I
so
think
if someone who doesn't do that already, right, doesn't know how to do that, right?
Yeah.
So you say, all right, I'm going back to my best performance. So what does that mean, right? Do you visualize what you felt like? Do you think
Oh yeah.
about, okay,
Yeah.
what,
That
what
would
do you,
that would
what do you,
sorry.
no, what do you do? Explain it. Go ahead.
Yeah, what I do and what I have other people do is think back to their best performance. Who was there? How did you feel at the moment? What do you see? What do you smell? How does your body feel? How do your emotions feel? Like literally sink into that old memory as if you were really there. Like you sit there and you meditate and you go right back into that actual real experience until it feels like you were literally there again. You let that wash over you, and if you want to set an anchor into it, you could do your salute, or you could say your trigger word, or you could play your trigger song, or have a smell. Anything that you could always access, and you've now kind of solidified it in that old memory, so you can always go back to it. Because the memory you can hold forever.
And what does it feel like when you get back in there?
Like you're back in your back literally in that old
And what are the
fight.
characteristics of that fight for you? The
Depending on
characteristics that you're trying to get to.
it's trying to get to that anxiety and that anxiety intensity, everything else washes away. The only thing around is my opponent. Past and future doesn't matter. There's just a person in front of me that's the hardest fight I've ever had in my life. So everything has to focus in right here.
Okay. John, what about you? Pretend you actually lost a fight in a double limb.
so. Actually, I have a almost. There's actually almost a real example. That's the first time I won Queen's Champion on Sierra. It wasn't a double limb, but it was a you fought 5 fights and they took the top scores after those 5. It was like a Swiss 5, and they took the top scores.
Yeah.
So you really to be guaranteed a spot in the next, like in the round of 16, you really needed 4 wins. And I lost my first fight of that tournament to a fighter I definitely shouldn't have lost to, and it definitely almost shook me. It was an indoor tournament, so like I actually I went out. I think I went outside and I like walked around and just tried to like let the feeling, like, because I was really frustrated, just like let that feeling just kind of like go away.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I think I
Get
might
rid
have
of
even,
it.
yeah, and then I think I might have even made my brother come out and like do some like drills with me real quick, just like throw some shots, and I just like parried and riposted just to kind of get a feel like, hey, I do actually like I do know how to fence.
Mhm.
Like that was a weird anomaly. It wasn't real. Um, and then I tried to kind of like Rowan was saying, kind of try to let it go, like but also kind of let the some of that frustration like kind of fuel me to be better, right? Like kind of that, because I sometimes will do better if I'm a little annoyed, right? Like a little frustrated has actually
Sure.
sometimes, like some of my best, like I said, I love actually having 2 tournaments in a row, like at war or something. If I do bad in one, like Rowan mentioned earlier, that I can sometimes do really well in the other one because I'm like so pissed off about it, and I just let that fuel me to like, so I kind of hang on to some of the negative bits a little bit. Um, to like motivate me to like do better, because I just want to get that feeling of that loss out of my system as quickly as possible, because I don't like.
It's a strange dichotomy that we're all talking about here, right? Like a lot of times we're saying flush everything out, only focus here, but at the same time we're also admitting that we all bring in a lot of emotional content into the fights, right? Like I fight
I think
better if
it's
I'm pissed off
I think
or
it's a
whatever.
really good point, and it's like a hard. I think that's why it's kind of hard to figure this out and like hard to teach to other people, because
Oh
there's
yeah.
definitely like contradictory advice, and it's that they're both true just depending on the situation. They can both be even true in the same moment, where it's like I both need to let it go, but also be mad about it
Yeah.
at the same time.
And
And it
I
sounds
think,
stupid, but
but I think it's key that you know that about yourself, right? Like you can say, "Hey, I can be a little bit pissed off, and it won't negatively affect me. In fact, it'll do the opposite." You know that, and so you're kind of leaning into it. Say, "Hey, I can use this in myself," and that's your system, right? That's your
yeah.
process, right? Everyone has to do their own process that way.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point too. It's like about learning, knowing yourself is essentially. I know what we're saying. A lot of what we're saying, right, is learn yourself.
Learn yourself for sure. Um, but also, but also get other people to help you. What
Yes.
about you, Boomy? When was the last time you had to overcome something inside of a tournament? How did you mentally deal with the first setback and come back, get yourself back focused and
In the
mentally?
scenario that you gave,
Or,
uh, I don't have a thing when I think about like I just do my normal salute and I continue on because it like the thing that happened prior is not something that I carry with me forward.
okay,
Like I said, the
So you just,
automatic, like my brain has already said, okay, nothing can be done about that. Now deal with the thing in front of you.
so reflexively focusing on what you can control versus what you can't.
Correct. Yep. Past has already happened, and that like instantly like happens. So that's like between bouts as well. If I lose one or drop one. Yep.
Um, I when I do something like that, I tend to get really focused and really intense pretty quick. A lot of the way that I fight involves like a tactile feel and a lot of like interplay of the sword and whatever. Um, that's just kind of my style. I will get way more intense and way more focused on getting a quick win. Um, cut out all the bullshit more than anything is what it feels like to me. But yeah, that's that's what it is for me. I also struggle to um, when it's something like that. Say like a round robin at the Ruby Joust, right? And I lose my first one, right? I will struggle to keep the macro level stuff out of my fight. So because like yeah, you have to win this one or the rest of them don't matter, right? I struggle with thinking about the entire tournament, like how am I going to beat this guy if I come against him in the finals or whatever. So my main focus at that point is don't worry about the next fight. Focus on this one and not the tournament itself, because you have to win this one in order to think about the other stuff. So that's usually a struggle for me, and that's the way I focus on it. It's like, hey, kick out all the stuff that happened. If this is going to happen next, right? I can't think about that. That will get me in my own head and not let me focus. So focus on the fight in front of me becomes very, very important to me, and that's what I tend to do in my mental energy is focus on what's in front of me. The emotional energy comes in letting me be pissed off about the previous fight. But
What do you do to refocus? So you're trying to like delete the old stuff so you can just be in the fight that's in front of you. But how do you do that, especially if you don't use anchors?
To me, it's like turning on a computer program, right? It's just a verb is focus, right? So
Yes.
I'm focusing on this fight, and so then I just mentally all focus, right? It's just a conscious, deliberate thing to focus on the fight itself and to get focus on what I'm feeling, focus on my opponent. Um, yeah, just bring all the big guns to bear and the singular focus of what I'm doing. It, it's something I have to practice, but it's just a deliberate thing of focusing on the fight. There's no, I don't really, it's not really more complicated than that or more complex. It's just something I practice.
Cool.
All right. Anything else we have to go over? We covered a lot of ground.
Read a lot,
In
yeah.
the 2.5
I mean, we
hours
could
we've been on here.
talk about this probably forever, honestly, but
It would be cool to kind of plan, because going through this, it's made me realize how kind of broad the topic is, the general topic is, because we could go like and its own conversation would be like what we were talking about earlier about just the what does it look like to get into high expectation phase, or
Mhm.
another one would be like in the moment actions and reactions and emotional processing. And honestly, emotional processing is its own conversation
Sure.
to be. But that's what I've realized in this conversation. I'm like, oh man, we jumped all into a lot of different places, and a lot of them had
Yep.
like threads that are just unread.
yeah.
I think that one of the main takeaways that we can point out here is that like it has to be deliberate, and you have to come up with your own process. Everything that works for me is not going to work for you, but you still have to do it, right? You still have to go and engage and figure out how to improve yourself this way, emotionally and intellectually.
Yeah, I learned a ton, like words like anchoring, and I have never ever visualized a like my best fight or worst fight, or even thought about it. Like that's a very interesting like way to frame kind of getting yourself
Uh,
back in. But I
that
just like
I always just go ahead.
I was just saying, I just never crossed my mind. I'm too present. Like when I'm really trying to be there, I'm like just literally the human in front of me in that moment. That's all I have room for.
Who just lives in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
The
I tried
big
to.
one for me is when you get the final killing blow and there's that big rush of emotion right after that.
Oh,
That that that
It's a big
sticks with me.
high.
I can remember. I won over 150 tournaments, and I can remember almost all of them from that moment.
I don't.
I was like, I've won a shit
I get
ton, and I
that.
don't remember it. Like I
Oh,
Yeah,
remember the
I
feel of
blank
winning.
out.
You know,
oh my
Blackout.
god, it's the best.
I remember
I'm glad
the
you guys
general
remember it
feeling.
because I fucking delete it. Like, boop.
Uh,
The moment after when you realize you won, you accomplished the thing.
I just delete. Like, I just kind of don't know where I am for a second, and then
Oh my goodness.
figure it. It's
I mean,
real. That's why I like after I won K and Q champs, I was like reached out to you because I had a lot of weird feelings because I was like just one fight at a time, and then I won the last fight, and I was like,
there's no more
fuck,
fights left.
there's no more fight.
Now what?
Now you have a job. That's how that works.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
Yeah, there's no like positive emotional rush. I just kind of like, ugh.
That's yeah.
Okay,
I guess
so now that we can talk. I mean, we're almost done here, right? We should probably wrap up in a little bit. But there's something that John I know went through, and I'm sure Boomie went through it too, and Rowan's gonna go through it at some point. Is when you become the mountain that other people are trying to climb,
yeah.
and if you win, Like you don't get any praise. Everyone just sort of expects that. There's no. I mean, you maybe get a fist bump or whatever, but if someone beats you, everyone's gonna cheer and everyone's gonna be like, "Oh, you did great." And it is a mental and emotional shift that you have to go through. Or at least I did. I don't know about you guys. What about you? I mean, when did you ever realize that you were the mountain? Was there a moment you realized that you were the mountain and not the climber anymore?
I don't remember if there was an exact moment for me. It was kind of like a slow realization. It started like when people, people always have the anecdotes like, oh, I drew like, oh man, if I got unlucky in this tournament, like I would, like I would draw like so and so in the first round or whatever, and like when my name started being the name that people would say is like the name that would be the unlucky, unlucky to draw, or like the like you people as you started being into people's anecdotes is like
Right.
kind of like a mountain or a combination of kind of like this, but it's also kind of somewhat like the boogeyman too to some people, where it's like
Sure.
like you know the person who comes along and ruins everyone else's day. um uh but I think I definitely like I just took it. I think I liked it for first. I was like, this is cool, this is like kind of what I wanted, right? And then it started to kind of like become hard because you're like you were saying, the expectation of like if you win no one cares, and if you lose then everyone's very happy for your opponent, and or they're like worried. Like I've definitely had people come up to me like, oh man, are you feeling okay, are you sick, are you
Oh, I
like
hate
did,
that one. Oh, fuck.
did that person not call their blow against you,
Yep.
like like they can't believe it, and it just shows like, no, fuck, I just lose sometimes because I'm mortal. I hate it too, but like it happens.
I have a
um
story. I'm going to tell real quick because it's funny.
yeah, please.
One of the first time that I won the Rose tourney at Gulf Wars, um, we were coming out, and you know how they call you out for pairings. Everyone go out for pairings, right? Everyone goes out on the field and they call the pairings. And you take your card and you go off and fight, whatever, or you go to whichever list and you fight. And it was like 200 people, right? So it's 200 people, and then it gets down to 100 people, and then it's 50 people, and it gets lower and lower. And we're out there, and I think it was Michael St. Christian from North
All right.
Shield.
Yeah.
And he was out there, and we're waiting for the marshal, and he's just trying to, everyone's kind of like nervous and looking around, like who's still left and whatever. And he goes, "Man, it's getting so I don't want to fight any of you guys out here, right? Like, didn't want to, whatever." And I'm snarky asshole, right? And I just went, "Really? Because we all want to fight you." And guess what the pairings were that next fight?
Of
It was
course.
me and Michael St. Christian.
Oh no.
But it was a funny story. I beat him. Um,
Of course.
but one of the things that actually started to bum me out about being the mountain was like I said, I love being a fencer, right? I love being a part of the fencing community, and I love the friends that I've made um, doing this, right? And it's been very rewarding. But that when I would get called in a pairing and someone would just be like, "Oh fuck," right? That actually bothered me a good bit for a while because it was like, man, I'm no longer a fun fight for people, right? I'm actually causing them to not have as good a day. Like I'm the source of someone's negative feeling, even if it's earned and legitimate and normal. It still was just like, man, I'm not the happy guy anymore. I'm not it was tough for me, honestly. It was tough for me to be like, man, I'm causing people to have less good of a day.
It's definitely I've definitely had mixed feelings. Like there's definitely times where I kind of like if I'm being honest, like I kind of like that. Like it's almost like a like it's
I mean,
fun.
there's a boost, sure.
But there's definitely other times where you're like, oh, come on, like just at least like give yourself a chance, right? Like don't lose before
Right.
we go out there, like
Yeah.
feeling. So it's definitely a kind of I get both sides, right? Like
Yeah.
but it's hard to maintain the motivation when there's a lot less to like there's a lot more to lose than to be gained, like socially in
Yeah.
any given tournament, right?
When someone said that to me, I try to end the fight as quick as possible because I don't want to think about it. I just don't want to think about. I just want it to be over.
Put them out their misery real quick.
Yeah, it's like, all right, well, shit. But you, Boomy?
Um,
you deal with that?
I frame it as it is a privilege to pass on what others gave to me, in my head, as in like it was a pleasure to me to chase you and Connor and Alessandro and John and frankly plenty of other humans that I've run into over the years. Um, and if I can, if I can be that for others, I know that I am that for others. I've been told that some number of times. Um, I take it as like that's a like a privileged position because not everybody gets to be in that position. And just objectively, like that's a small percentage of
Yep.
people who go through a sport, and so because of that, I feel like grateful to be able to do it while I can.
Oh,
And then
100%.
and I just want to add in this specific vein of conversation, John and I have talked about it. One of the singularly most impressive things about Torah is how he has the will to grind after sitting on top for so long. Like he's so genuinely, like when I talk to him, he's still genuinely passionate about fencing 30 plus years in. I'm like, that's why there's another gulf into where you are as far as a fighter. Because I think the majority of people reach a like, I'm pretty good. Like, I succeed very well. I don't have reason to, like, it's really hard for me to be motivated to grind that chasm between him and I. If like, that's almost all of the work, right? It's like it's not just getting an A plus. It's like getting a 3.95 GPA up to a 4 or whatever. It's like the last little bit that has to yield so little value. Yeah, it is. It is, maybe another decade of work to catch up. Because the return on your work is so small, and it's refining every little thing, and then you constantly get rewarded in every other direction. Where you're like, oh, I'm just already doing the things I should be doing, and doing them well, especially in a tournament context.
But Boomie, I'm gonna add something real quick. I would ask for a clarification. So you're bringing up the fact that like you're the like this sort of mountain, right, or this whale that people want to be better than, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you enjoyed being like having people that you wanted to, that you were hunting and chasing to try to get better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I never feel bad about beating the fighters or having to fight those fights against the people who are like genuinely hungry to improve, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
just like, and they're nipping at my heels, and I'm kind of just like whacking them down, right? Like that. That's fun. Like
Yeah.
that's how it should
Oh,
be.
absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
more the people who are just like the hopelessness that when they draw you in the tournament, uh, and they're like kind of what Dom was saying. It's like you're just ruining their day, and yes, that's on them to like have a better attitude, but like in that moment it sucks. Like those people are the people that like are not as fun to fight because it's not, or it's only fun for a little bit. Like it gets really old where it's like you're not like motivated to chase me. You're just like accepting that you can't beat me, and you're like you're gonna get knocked out of this turn before you even go in the field, right? Like
I absolutely understand.
that's
Like
the
that
frustrating
person
part about being at the top.
or those
Not
people, that crowd of
yeah.
people.
I just
So
how do you deal with
yeah. So I'm framing right like a portion of the people you're talking about, the people who are chasing the upcoming and want to drive and want to be pushed. That's great, right? And I know what you mean. For that, the other crowd, the crowd that like, I drew this person, right? Like that, you get that audible sigh in the pairings, in the callings, which happens. I feel like everybody here has experienced that and is not infrequent. Um, for me, I try to, outside of the actual fight, be as gracious as I can, if that makes sense. Like, I don't get as much on the back end because I try to, I try to give them a fun fight. I don't do what Connor did and try to like change how I fight in order to give them I actually feel like it's sort of insultive from my
I
perspective.
don't like it when he did that.
I want to give my fight and treat you as a fighter, which means I'm going to present my best because you're pointing a sword at me in a tournament context, right? But I will try to, before and after, try to be a gracious winner and try to not exacerbate any of the negative feelings. Because ultimately, I can't control those things. They may not be able to control them either. But what I can do is not add on. Like, I'm not going to try to explain to them what I did without them kind of asking for that. I'm not going to, and I'm going to give space if necessary. If they seem happy about it, like they're not upset in the moment, then I'll be a little bit more, like give the banter and the social interaction that people want to have in general in that context. So I guess
when
the
you
answer
were
is reading the room. Go ahead,
makes sense.
Tom.
Rowan, real quick, you didn't like that when Connor did that, but a majority of the people do when he would make the fight fun for them.
That's not a winning mindset.
Like it can be if you need a boost, if you need a dopamine boost to get you on there. Perspective is everything. Remember.
Yeah, I agree to
But
that point. I, I, I very much agree that it can be a very positive experience depending on the human. But my
it's
perspective is the one that the people around me share, which is it's more insultive than
right.
positive.
Well, when I was your mountain, right? If
Mhm.
I had fought down to you and tried to make it fun for you, that wouldn't have been productive for you
No,
or fun
it
for
would have
you.
been outright insultive in my
Yeah.
perspective. It would have been like, oh, why are you playing with me, as opposed to giving me your best. If you're going to pressure me like you would anybody else. Don't try to make it
Yeah.
your perception of my fun, if that makes sense. Because my fun is grinding into
Okay.
that.
Context.
Hmm. Correct. Yeah. Literally that.
No, I think that we're just acknowledging like I agree with everything you said for me. I think just the acknowledgement that it can become tedious or just tiring to deal with the people who are just frustrated fighting you over and over and over again. Like,
Hmm.
and I think that's kind of what like that's kind of just like its own mental challenge to be like I'm gonna be like the villain of a lot of other people's stories
Hmm.
Yeah.
for a while, and like just learning to like mitigate that, like you're saying, with just being courteous or trying to give back and train people or whatever, right? Like you try to do all what you can, but there's certain times where like that does it definitely like it can get old sometimes, and I think
So
that's just kind
it's a mental challenge that we have to deal with in this shift that we have to go through.
of, yeah, and it's not something, and it is definitely 100% a privilege to be in that situation, right? To have someone be frustrated to have to fight you in a tournament,
Yep.
like it's a huge privilege to have something that we all earn. So
Yep.
it's
Hmm.
not like it's a very like first world problem, uh,
All right.
but it definitely can still be a thing.
Absolutely. Anything else we want to cover?
I think that's pretty good as far as coverage is concerned. We tackle a lot of different topics.
Yeah, I'm pretty good. We know we could talk about more stuff, but
I'm sure we could. I'm sure we could always do that.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say this
an
is the kind
episode
of
two
thing
of this.
I say we ruminate on the conversation, and then if we want to reprise it with a different set of questions, we definitely can.
We could definitely make this like a series, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep,
Do
yep.
something on like emotional involvement or how to practice or stuff like that.
Exactly.
I would love that.
Chat, thank you so much for hanging out with us this evening. Hopefully, for those who've come through, uh, you got something from it, as far as something that is implementable and actionable. Ideally, you can reach any of us individually. If
Please do.
Yeah, you just reach out. All of us are fairly easily contactable, I suppose. But yeah, you reach out to
Yeah,
us. Well, we're happy to talk shop. And this applies to
anytime.
all competitive pursuits. For those who don't know, I am also a fencer, a knight, and a grappler, and do all three actively. Um, the other thing is, for those YouTube frogs who are going to be watching this after the fact, you can also post any questions you have down in comments, and we'll check in and respond, as we're happy to interact with the viewers. This is what it's all about: is having the conversation with you guys. So,
And read
Yeah,
this book.
yeah. Oh, the invisible
Read the book.
dom, the book.
Like and subscribe.
That looks like a
Follow
creepy
Boomy on Twitch.
ghost.
not a sponsor.
All right. Everybody, have a good night. Have a good weekend. And we will talk to you
Good night.
next time.
So
Goodbye.
everybody,
Bye.
bye.
All right.